We're on.
Okay, everybody. Welcome, everybody. It's about 2:30 on February 26, 2018, and we have a quorum, and we have a number of guests. Welcome, everybody, for your interest. Good seeing you. And we're going to begin our meeting with, as we always do, the approval of minutes from the January 22nd, 2018 board meeting. Is there a motion?
I looked at the minute which was sent by Lisa and also compared it with what was sent with the correction. With the correction, we're going back to the long minute. I don't think that's our purpose to do that long. So I'm going to move we accept the draft which Lisa sent it to us because that's already everything is there. They don't need to go on and on and on. That's my move. So original, which is I have a copy.
The original minutes sent by Lisa? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
Yes.
Dave?
First of all, we have a process by which, let me change that. I'd like to move to amend Nahid's motion to add the changes that were circulated in advance of this meeting by first by myself and then by Alan.
So, Kevin, how do we...
Second for that amendment.
Okay, we need a second for that amendment?
I'll second it.
Okay. So procedurally...
And then I speak to the amendment.
Right.
Okay.
So we have a process for approving our minutes. That process is that draft minutes are sent out in advance for reasons that are they're no one's fault. These minutes went out a little bit later than usual. I still responded by the established deadline for these. I think you will see if you look at the and I'm gonna pull up the version. You will see that there are that the minutes themselves before I touched them were longer than past minutes were. And that I added very little in the way of additional text. Everything that I added was consistent with what actually happened at the meeting, and there were a number of places where what I added was substantively different than what the minutes said without them. If a board member can simply walk into the boardroom and say this is too long and ignore the suggestions that board members have, I'm not quite sure why we have minutes, because they are circulated to us in advance in order to make them so that they accurately reflect what happened at the meeting. Now, I can't speak to Alan's comments other than to say that I reviewed them. They were more detailed than I would have done, or that I did, for that matter. He did catch a number of things that I didn't. But I think that there are a number of reasons for being more specific than what we were, and some of them are for the board's own protection. Let me give you an example. We had a discussion about the polling place for precinct 430, which is the precinct where St. Elizabeth's Catholic School was the polling place and is no longer interested in being the polling place. And the minutes before I amended them merely said that the staff recommendation was to go to Richard Montgomery High School. Richard Montgomery High School is outside of the precinct. As you all know from many discussions we've had before, and as Kevin can confirm, we have a legal obligation to look at places that are within the precinct before we accept places that are outside of the precinct. I added to the minutes a number of things that discussed the other places that that staff had looked at. If someone were to challenge that particular polling place being moved to Richard Montgomery High School, which is a fair distance for the people who live in that precinct, then the fact that we considered other locations within the precinct would be relevant and helpful. Another change that I added was that Mary Ann made clear at that meeting, and others agreed, that if we did move to Richard Montgomery for that precinct, that we thought it was important to have a separate room in order to have separate results by precinct, which we do for every precinct in the county. The minutes did not say the reasoning for that commentary. We had a pretty significant discussion about the outreach committee, or the communications committee, I think is how it's referred to in the minutes. And both Mary Ann and I stated very strongly our belief about how we thought that the process for that committee should have been handled, and that was left out of the meeting. I also added to the section about the training schedule. As board members know, I've been something of a Johnny One Note about the need for the training schedule to take into account the religious holidays and not be scheduled in conjunction with the religious holidays. This training schedule accomplished the goal that I was talking about, and I made a point of complimenting Leslie for accomplishing that. I thought it was important for that to be in the minutes. We do have people out there who have complained in the past about our training schedule and about how it conflicts with the holidays, and the fact that we took that into consideration is of public interest. So, given that the work on this has already been done, given that we don't even have to print our final minutes, we put them online, so it's not like we're talking about the extra paper it's going to cost. Given that it should be all of our goal that our minutes accurately reflect what happened in the meeting, we all know that listening to the recording is possible, but also very time-consuming, and that it's much easier for people to read it in the minutes. I'm kind of hard-pressed to understand what the harm is on allowing board members to make suggestions about how the minutes can be more reflective of what happened in the meeting. So that is why I'm moving to include those comments. I would remind you again, my comments arrived in a timely fashion, even though the minutes did not arrive in a timely fashion. I don't blame anyone for that, but I'm just saying that I did it by the deadline. I think that it's a disturbing sign for our process if we're just going to say that none of that matters because we think that the minutes are too long.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
You mentioned time consuming if somebody listened to the tape. If I recall correctly, when we start taping, we discussed it. Why we want to tape? So you're the one you mentioned people will listen to it.
Yes.
You have to tape it, therefore, how come now is it time consuming? It's already taped there. Like anybody can listen to it. So how come suddenly it becomes time consuming?
It's not suddenly time consuming, Nahid. As you know, I'm probably one of the primary consumers of our tapes of board meetings, and I know exactly how time consuming it is.
Yeah.
And that hasn't changed. Minutes and recordings are not necessarily substitutes for each other.
Okay, can I say something? Yes.
Wait, let me finish.
Let me just respond to what you said. I mean, to me, it is time consuming to listen to the entire recording. It's also time consuming to find the spot on the recording that that you're looking for, if you're looking for a particular subject, especially if the minutes just say board members discussed X topic. That it doesn't reflect a change on my part at all. It's always been time consuming. That doesn't change the fact that people are interested in it. I have talked to people who listened to our minutes who I was surprised were listening, listened to our recordings, who I was surprised listened to our recordings.
And you mentioned the minute, the draft is already long. That's the reason I said it's already there, because it's longer than usually we do, so therefore it's unnecessary to add more pages to it. If anybody can go to the detail, they can go and listen to the tape. Otherwise, everything is here. Mentioning Mr. Neiman said that, Mr. Neiman said that, it's already in the tape if somebody going to listen to it. It's a comprehensive draft minute.
Marianne?
I can't believe we're having yet another discussion on the minutes that seem to take an awful lot of board time. I originally reviewed the minutes after I received Alan's, and I, went through to see the few corrections, grammatical, etc. Good editor that Alan did, and I didn't. Whatever I was looking at didn't show the other. So I've been listening to this, and I've been looking at what it was. I have to say, I agree with David in this case, and I think David has worked diligently for the past many months now to bring his edits into conformance with what I think the overall sense of the board was for when we make changes to the minutes. I think in the two instances that were described here, the one involving St. Elizabeth's, it does make sense to point out for somebody looking at this is a hot button issue, so to speak. People are going to be upset when, they find they're in a different polling place, and a polling place that's really, out of their precinct and quite a distance from where they've been voting for many, many years. So it indicates the work on the part of the staff to find these other places that are nearby that were potential sites. Unfortunately, they had reasons that they couldn't do it. So I don't think there's a problem stating that kind of situation. And I do think, although it wasn't my change that mentioned my name in terms of the communications committee, I certainly did speak to it at the time in terms of how I thought the committee should be continued and that there should be a minority member of the board appointed to it, and that I was surprised that hadn't automatically happened when Ms. Rivera-Oven resigned from the board. So I don't really see those additions as being something, extraneous here that isn't a necessary kind of thing. I think it does give a fuller discussion to two issues that really were important. So I support Mr. Neiman's motion on this to accept the minutes as they were amended by both he and Alan.
My concern is, and I have no quarrel with the substance of David's additions or amendments or Alan's. But 2 years ago we decided that we were going to put on our website that people can listen to the tape of the meeting, and we basically went over 2 years ago that the minutes should basically be a roadmap of what we talked about, and that if someone wanted to get into more detail, they could always listen to the tape. I have no disagreements with the edits, except the length of this transcript or these minutes. Even before the changes, it's more like a novel than a set of minutes. I mean, my desire is that we get back to what we've been doing and just homogenize or reduce the amount of words in our minutes. So my objections are not to the substance of the edits, but to the length of the entire set of minutes. I mean, I would just throw out, and if we can, we can. I would like to see us make an attempt and maybe move this to next month to see if Lisa can reduce the size and get back to the intent that we reached 2 years ago. Dave?
A couple of things. I'd be interested to know what exactly is the harm of the minutes being longer, because the work's already been done. You're actually talking about adding additional staff work to make them shorter. If you make them shorter by taking out the amendments that we've added, we'll be back here next month having the same conversation. Because it was my view, I mean, I thought I was pretty limited in what I added. Just to address the implication of Nahid's comments, I added my name in exactly one place for the compliment that I gave to Leslie about the training schedule. If you would,
self-serving now? I mean, was it necessary?
I don't think it was self-serving. I think it was accurate. I think I've been complaining about the training schedule and the Jewish holidays for years now. I thought that it would be a good signal to people if board members would prefer that it say a board member complimented Ms. Woods for the training schedule and the new locations as well as for avoiding holidays. I have no problem with that at all. I am not running for office. I want to make that very clear. I will not be back here by tomorrow at 9 o'clock to put my name down for anything. Okay? So if I'm here, it'll be just to see who walks in. But the idea that my clarifying statement that I made, that I know, I mean, I realized that part of the problem was that I'm talking about a community that perhaps others don't hear from the way I do about the training schedule and the holidays. I was very pleased that the staff heard that concern, and that concern wasn't expressed just by me. That concern was also expressed by Marianne and Gracie in the past, and Jim as well. On this particular occasion, it was expressed by me, but and obviously I added other people's names in the minutes just as often as I added mine. But like I said, the main reason was that they were substantive reasons for all of the changes that I recommended in these minutes, and I personally don't see what the I mean, I can understand in general that we don't want it to. It is not even close to a transcript of or a novel, but it's definitely not close to a transcript of our meeting. But in the case of the current minutes, I'm not sure what the harm is. The work's already been done.
Jim? Yeah.
Dave, Alan.
Briefly, the minutes of the January meeting were 8 pages. This is the way Lisa prepared these. There were just 9 pages. So there's only one additional page in the original draft that she did. Also, the easiest way for the public to find out what we did is to look at the minutes, which are on the website, as opposed to listening to the entire tape. And finally, I apologize for any confusion I may have caused. I took David's draft. When I took it, I put it into a new file. When I did that, it accepted all the changes of his, and as if they hadn't been new changes. Anyway, I'll work things out differently in the future. Just said like typographical things to Lisa to work on to eliminate that process. But I think that David's motion is well taken.
Jim. Lisa, are you still doing the minutes?
Yes.
How long does it take you?
10 days?
How long?
10 days.
10 days? Thank you.
You're not suggesting it takes you 8 hours a day for 10 days?
That's not what I said. No, I said
Okay.
10 days.
Okay. So you're saying it's 10 days from when you start to when you finish. How many hours of work does it require?
I don't know what it would take to require someone,
Right.
but me,
Right.
I usually spend probably about 4 hours a day on them, listening to the audio, making sure I capture stuff, and 4 hours a day.
And was this month any different than previous months?
This last month, if you recall, I missed a little bit of the meeting in the
Right.
beginning of it, so yes, it was a
Right.
little longer. It was parts that I wasn't there for, so public comments and so forth, making sure I captured accurately public comments, which were a couple of public comments, I think.
Thank you.
I know, that's why. Yeah.
Well, Mr. President, in the interest of moving on, I don't think we ought to have a battle royal about this, but I do think that we're kind of edging back to the Who Shot John version of the minutes, and I don't think every little detail about whose position, supported by what, and all the details needs to be in there. And I think the changes at the bottom of page 8 and page 9, it's kind of seems designed to amplify Mr. Naaman's position on the Communications Committee. Well, okay, he volunteered, he's on it. I really don't think it's all that important, but in the
That
interest
issue
of-
was important. I take issue with that, Alex, because I spoke to it, and I think you're reading it one way, and maybe others of us are reading it another, and it just says, this is what the committee's going to do now, moving forward, and why it's doing it.
Well, not to mention that the entire point of that entire conversation that I've added was exactly the fact, Alex, that you didn't think this committee was important enough to add another member.
Well, and I'll have more to say about that.
So let me just kick. We have to run an election for 750,000 voters, and I don't think we should waste our time on this. I will support David's motion this time, but next time, Lisa, let's make, not your fault, but let's try and, why are we taping the meetings if we're going to have 9-page minutes? It's not worth fighting today. We got bigger fish to fry. So let's take a vote on David's motion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, so what was that? Four.
Three. I got
I heard the three
Three,
of us.
yes.
I don't
I
know
heard
how
three.
Nahid and
I don't
Alex
think she
voted.
voted.
Abstain.
She abstained. Alex?
Abstain.
So, 3.
So now we vote on the amended motion, I believe.
Is there?
Isn't that what he said? He was
We just did.
your motion.
No, you voted on the amendment.
He said on your motion, yes.
Right, my motion was an amendment to Nahid's motion. Now we vote on the amended motion.
How about that? But it's the same motion.
Well, it's
It's with the
the
new-
changes.
yeah,
The
yeah.
original motion from Nahid was without the changes. This is now with the changes.
Is there a motion?
It's already on the table.
Okay, we have a second. Any discussion?
It's already on the table.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Did you vote aye?
I voted aye.
So 4, 1 abstention. But let's make an effort to kind of shorten these up next time. Okay. Any additions, changes to the agenda? Not really. Public comments.
Yes, we
Lisa?
have public comments. First individual called is Chris Burberry.
And let me say this. I know some people walked in late. If you didn't sign up, I know the rest of the board might get angry with me. If you didn't sign up and you want to speak, after the people that signed up, just let us know.
Mr. Burberry would like to switch the public
Bradbury.
commenter. Bradbury. Sorry, yes. Bradbury.
If you want to speak and you didn't sign up, just let us know after.
So we have Danielle
Okay? Welcome.
Matif.
Thank you. Hello, to members of the board.
You can sit if you want, Daniel.
Okay, thank you so much.
We got a
for
comfortable
inviting
chair.
me. And to all the guests, my name is Danielle Mativ. I'm a candidate for Montgomery County Council at Large and the member of the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee from District 20. As a party official and a candidate, I strongly oppose any cuts to voter outreach, especially outreach aimed at communities of color and non-English speaking voters. There is no good time for such cuts, but the timing is especially bad in an election with more candidates than ever. The ballot will be very complex, and all voters will need more information. Since the last election, Montgomery County has lost a number of major media outlets, which means there will be less public discussion of this election. Instead of cutting back, the BOE must do more voter outreach. The BOE has an obligation to produce and distribute materials that speak to all potential voters. This includes timely and accurate information to inform voters of the right to participate in the democratic process. They need to know about important registration deadlines, location of early voting sites, and the basic mechanics for registering to vote. Montgomery County is a majority-minority county, and more than 1/3 of our residents come from other countries. Our diverse county needs to ensure voter outreach efforts include communities of color. It is essential to reach out to all members of our community, including historically disenfranchised immigrant communities and African Americans. Budget decisions send important messages about which voices get to be heard during election time, and we must prioritize inclusion and justice. The Board of Elections must provide the needed information about how to participate fully in the electoral process. This must be in a variety of languages and culturally appropriate formats. Many immigrants come to this country to experience freedoms that were denied to them in their homelands. We need to welcome them into the process in as many ways as possible and encourage them to vote. For Maryland voters, the Motor Vehicle Administration is the point of contact for voter registration. This is not as much the case in immigrant communities and communities of color, as these residents are less likely to own cars. The VOE must fill the gap. In an era of easily distributed fake news, it is critical for us to get out the correct information. Democracy itself is under attack now. Our response should be to do the utmost to increase voter education and engagement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Bradbury, at-large member for the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee. I just want to just talk a little bit about the actual budget for the advertising. I want to talk, I spoke with some of the members here already. It looks like the board, or at least everyone, is supporting trying to get more money from the county council. I think that's a good step. I do want to just commend you guys on some of the, that you've actually had it. My phone died, so I don't have the budget in front of me. But it looks like, you guys did a decent job, or at least are trying to spread the money around. It looks like you have a cut that you have to deal with, so I want to commend you on that. But I want to remind you guys, that the purpose of this, and I think the Hispanic television, the Hispanic outreach is pretty high, and that's because there's a big population of Hispanics in the county. So it's the largest minority group in the county. And that language barrier is actually more of a deficiency. They have a sort of a handicap to try to get to the polls, understand what they're doing, and that's why we're using that. So it looks like they've been cut. There's a big budget for Hispanic outreach, or not Hispanic outreach, but Spanish advertising. But that's the budget that's been cut, it looks like, right? There hasn't been a cut to anywhere else. So I just want to remind you guys that, that's why we're doing it, because there's an actual deficiency, there's an actual handicap for that population accessing the polls. It's not just something that's thought of, it's a physical, actual handicap. The other thing that I want to point out that other folks have brought to my attention is that the spread of some of the other media outlets down at the bottom, when it comes to WMAL, WPGC, iHeartMedia, that may actually not be spread out to all of the different populations, all of the different minority groups. When you talk about WPGC, that's clearly a station about R&B and hip-hop, which is favored, I guess, by African Americans, but that's only one subset of that. There's actually other stations, Radio 1, stations like that could be represented here that aren't. So I guess just in closing, my statement is just that, this budget, as it gets cut, as it gets smaller, we really need to focus on spending money on folks that need a little bit more help getting to the polls. A little bit more help understanding what they need to, in order to get to the polls and get their vote in counted.
Mr. Bradbury, you understand no decision has been made
Yes.
on anything
Correct.
yet.
Correct.
Really?
That's why I'm just here reminding you guys and commending you for the work you have done to spread out the budget. I like that Korea Times is added here. I think that's really good use of money there. It's just that where all the cuts come from, when you look at Comcast, there's a $3,000 cut there, and I understand there's cuts that need to be made, but that's where
There haven't been any cuts because we haven't decided anything yet. That's my only point.
Fair enough.
These are just proposals. That's all they are.
Budget, right? It came out of the subcommittee, correct?
No, it was a staff proposal and it was under discussion, but the committee has made no decision.
Fair enough. Well, there you go. And this is just a reminder of that purpose. So again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chris.
We have Mr. Paul Bessel.
Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
You want to take your comfortable
I think
seat?
if I stand, I'll be induced to not talk too much.
Okay.
I just wanted to share with you, when I first heard that the Russians had tried to affect U.S. elections, I was stunned. But I think there are enough facts now that we have to believe that's true. And then when I heard that they actually targeted Maryland, that really shocked me. So I wanted to share with you the fact that I hope you'll take this as seriously as I'm taking it and take extra steps. I'm not sure what the steps are. Maybe have the FBI come in and give you a briefing or find out what other election boards are doing. But the very fact that a foreign government is trying to interfere with our elections scares me. I've been suggesting to people that they call or use the website to see if they're still registered. The Russians might have been successful at changing registrations. So I just want to urge everybody, please take this very seriously and protect our elections. Thank you,
Paul.
Jim.
Thank you, Paul.
Mr. President, we have Ajija Van Giesen. Gason?
Hi, I'm just representing myself. I am speaking to ensure that, like the first speaker mentioned, not to make any cuts on voter outreach. I'm referencing the 2014 Montgomery County Task Force for Voter Rights, that in off-year elections, voter turnout is actually abysmal compared to regular presidential year elections. So there is even more reason to hopefully avoid making cuts to voter outreach. Communities that are disenfranchised, have limited access to resources, are going to be primarily affected by this. And, I'm here just to community voice to say it is important to continue to fund voter outreach, especially in off-year elections.
Thank you.
Mr. President, we also have Diana Conway.
Okay.
Hi.
How are you? Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Diana Conway. I'm here as a 25-year resident of the county, and I'm also here representing my husband, who's running for county council at large in a small field of other candidates, one of which apparently is not there. So I'm here specifically because I just came from a lunch, Women's Democratic Club lunch for Black History Month, and our speaker, ironically enough, was Kristen Clark, who is the head of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. And she was going over, in perfect innocence, going over the various exciting developments under voter registration, voter access, voter suppression, purging of lists, denial of access to ballots, closing voter stations. I'm not saying any of this is happening here, but the irony of her speech today, and then being told that, by the way, there's a question at the County Board of Elections whether they're going to maybe cut back on some outreach to affected communities that are already low turnout communities. So I'm here to urge that not be the case, that Maryland not follow the direction of some of the more distressing outcomes that we're seeing around the country, where a concealed carry permit qualifies you to vote, but a university ID does not. Again, I'm not saying that's the case here. I'm simply urging that we take what we call the Montgomery County way and go the other direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, we also have Fran, is it Rothenstein?
Rothstein.
Sorry.
Welcome, Fran.
Thank you. I'm glad to follow Diana. I'm the president of the Women's Democratic Club of Montgomery County, and I came just now from the same luncheon Diana attended. And it was kind of ironic. I started my introduction of Kristen Clark with this quote from Cory Booker. The opposite of justice is not injustice, it is inaction. If we do not take action to keep people informed about who is on the ballot, where they can vote, why they should vote, in a way that they can understand and access, we are not acting the way that I would hope our county would act, and I encourage you to do that. Many members of the Women's Democratic Club were on site at the Leland Center protesting 2 years ago when this board tried to close that early voting site. We were able to encourage you to reopen that site, or to keep that site open, as well as one other up-county site. I'm here for the same reason today. I'm glad to know you have not yet taken any action. However, there is action on the table that would allow you to cut the money for outreach to Spanish-speaking communities, other language minorities, and African Americans. That would, in my view, be a travesty under any circumstances, but particularly in this county, which is now majority minority, in this county where we try to be as welcoming of every element of diversity possible, for you to try to deny these people the opportunity to exercise their rights as Americans would be shameful. I hope you won't do it. I hope you'll keep them informed.
Thank you.
That is it.
That was it? Does anybody else want to address us? Yes, just tell us your name so we
Linda Mahoney, I'm on the Democratic Central Committee.
Welcome,
right now
Linda.
For District 19, and
Okay.
I'm just looking at my cell phone. There are about 6 or 8 other Democratic Central Committee people who are urging us to speak loudly and forcefully about the proposed cuts and to speak against them. We need to involve everybody in our democratic system, not just people who it's easy for them to get to the polls, it's easy for them to understand what's going on. We need the outreach, and we really would appreciate your really considering before you make any cuts like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Mark Naveau. I'm also here with the Women's Democratic Club of Montgomery County. I'm also representing a group called Do the Most Good Montgomery County, which is a relatively newly formed activist group in the county, very involved in political action and elections. We've just gone through a series of interviews with about 150 grassroots leaders of immigrant groups and communities around the county, and one of the common themes is a lack of understanding and awareness about elections, about how to register, about when to vote, about where to vote, about whether you have to vote in the primaries, whether you have to be registered with a party to vote in the primaries, etc. So it's a big lift without cutting back on outreach to get this message out to all the populations that need to hear it and to help them be franchised, not disenfranchised. So I would add my voice to those that you've heard before, saying that any reduction in outreach of information to these communities will be a serious setback to us in trying to spread the word and help to close the gap and equalize the information and the access to information across the county. So thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you. Anybody else?
Over here.
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Brenda Wolf. I'm the District 14 representative from the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee. I'm also here as a board member of the Women's Democratic Club. I'd like to lend my voice to those that do not want us to stray from inclusiveness. This county is well known for that, and it would be a shame to take a step backwards, particularly in light of where we are today and what's coming out of the news around the country. We want to be as welcoming as possible. I also would like to encourage you to reach out to the community to find out the outlets that the communities listen to, because I looked at your advertising budget, and particularly with regard to African Americans, this is not the outlet that the majority of people listen to. So I think it would be helpful to you if you would consult with the churches or the NAACP or other organizations that deal with African Americans in this community to find out the most where you could get the most bang for your buck, because it's certainly not where you're advertising right now in the African American community.
Jim, could I? Yeah. Brenda, thank you for coming. You should know that when we set up the budget 2 years ago, we did look into advertising with WHUR and with WMMJ, and we did actually have some of those kinds of conversations you're talking about. And the cost was, I think, a significant factor at that time, among other things. Part of my hope, at least, is that if we can get enough of an increase from the county council for the outreach budget for the general election, which is the FY19 budget, and hopefully everyone here who is supporting outreach will be talking to the county council about that when that opportunity comes, that we would be able to expand into many more outlets, because there's obviously a difference between the somewhat younger demographic on WPGC and then the demographics in some of the other places, just as I'm sure there are differences among the other stations as well.
Thanks, David. Thank you, Brenda.
Yes,
yes, sir.
Greg Williams, Democratic Central Committee, representing District 15, Up County. I just wanted to, without taking too much time, echo Danielle, the first speaker, and then the last speaker, Brenda, and offer also help if there's any. I work very close with the churches, especially the African American churches. If there's any help that I can provide, I'll be glad to do that.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Bearden Sullivan. I'm just a private citizen. Don't know all the details of how this works, but I do know that I received an 8.7% increase in my property taxes. Things like outreach, things which may be good, feel-good things, cost money. And I'm a person who, I don't want to pay any more taxes. At some point, we have to cut someplace. I realize people want to involve people in voting. I understand how it all works, but if you want to do that, that's great. But I really don't want you to do it with my money that you're just taking from me. I'm sick of having money taken from me for things that other people might think feel good, but enough is enough.
Thank you. Thank you. Is anybody else? I'm spinning around here. Okay, Mary Ann's been tugging at me. I know she's got something important to say.
Well, no, I'm thinking in light of all the people who have gone to the trouble of coming out here to be part of the meeting, I would like to suggest, Mr. President, that we move the issue of the communication report and budget up on the agenda and take it up at this time. It's currently toward the end of the meeting, and I think it would be nice to get this resolved so people can be on their way.
I agree. Let's move it up, the agenda item.
And then I guess I'd like to speak to
the.
Okay, I'm not
to the advertising budget proposals.
Yes. First of all, I'd like to say I currently serve with Naheed on the budget committee of this of our Board of Elections. So we work diligently on all the areas of the budget that come into play with this. And one of the things that I don't know how aware people are of the process, but every year we go through a very lengthy process of meeting with the county executive and his budget staff. We then meet with the county council that oversees our area. And we have been, in the 6+ years that I've been serving on the board, we go in there every year, and one of the principal things that we talk about, probably the principal thing, is our outreach money. The media money is one part of outreach. We have another whole part that Gilberto here oversees on the board, which involves schools and involving all the young students and getting them and their families involved in elections, etc. Going to countless organization meetings. I'm sure many of you have probably seen Gilberto at these various organizations where He's soliciting to get judges for the elections, as well as doing registration, having material that announces the early voting sites and all of the dates for all of the elections and early voting, etc. So this has been something that I can say without any hesitation is absolutely top of mind for this board and the board that preceded this board, which I had the honor of serving as president of. I over the weekend have been in touch with members of our board here, and specifically the two members of the communications committee that was formed, Alex Vincent, who chairs it, and David Naiman, to see what can be done on this. Our problem this year is that we have taken a couple of cuts to the overall budget and never had from the county executive or the county council any push to put more money into this particular area, but instead what we've been handed were a couple of different cuts to it. I don't remember the exact percentages, I'm sure Margie, but it's 2% here, and there might have been another one of another two along the line. But anyway, when that happens, believe me, every time, if you've been to these meetings, we are scrambling to to see where are we going to take it. We have a very small overall budget here that we're dealing with, so it's always robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. But this area is crucial to us, and we certainly recognize it. So I spent quite a bit of time this weekend going over our overall budget for this fiscal year to see where could we possibly squeeze more money out of it. We're talking about a shortfall of $7,000 that is the difference between what we spent in the last election cycle for the media and what we have to spend this time. And I believe I have, it's a little more than 7. But I then met briefly this morning with Marjorie Rohr, who is our budget director, and to share my suggestions with her. She came back, and part of what I suggested would work, and she in turn had another suggestion. And so, Mr. President, I think we have been able to come up with 3 areas in the budget, and he was also part of this discussion this morning before we started this meeting, where we could take some money out of 3 areas of the budget, which would then make up the shortfall of the here it is, the $7,720, and I would propose that we take those cuts in those 3 areas, and I'll be glad to delineate them here, and then propose a budget that would retain the amount that we had in the last election cycle, and that and it will also include the extra money for the Korean, but it will bring everything else up, including the level of spending, to what it was in the last election cycle.
So there'd be no cuts in the Hispanic media?
There will be no cuts in those. It will remain the same. Now, it's not putting more money in, but you heard my my description of what we're dealing with here. I mean, just to get us where we were, and what we are currently working on is the fiscal 19 budget, which is not completed yet. The county executive's office is still working on it, and we're going to fight to get additional monies. The fiscal 19 budget will be providing the money for the general election. This money that we're talking about here is only for the media for the primary election. So in a sense, primaries traditionally get a lower turnout. I mean, we don't want to get a lower turnout. We're always looking for bigger turnout. But, we feel strongly that it's going to be important to really be able to increase those areas to which people have spoken very well and very passionately about today in the fiscal 19. But I think if we can restore to this budget where we were, I think that should accomplish what we're trying to do at the moment.
No, thank you.
With the very limited funds we have.
Before I throw that out to the board to approve or disapprove, I want to introduce Mike Subin, who's an assistant to County Executive Ike Leggett, who's been a tremendous liaison between our office and the county executive. Mike, did you want to say anything about the budget process?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize the executive has not made any final decisions on anything yet. That won't be available till March 15th when he sends the budget over.
That's for 2019.
That's 2019.
But there's a big relationship. The board went before him last week to make their pitch, and this was an issue that they brought up to try and get those additional funds.
Thank you, Mike. And thanks for your help.
He sent over a savings plan, which has made other cuts. So there's a lot of relationships between this year's budget, the savings plan, and then what may be left over from this year to be able to apply to next year. So it all comes together in that process.
Thanks, Mike.
Jim?
Alan?
If I can add, the very first words out of Ike Leggett's mouth on February 6th when we met with him, he said, hope we can
It's allegedly a private meeting, so be careful.
Yeah, I would ask you, Mr. Banoff, to not discuss anything.
All right.
But all I can say is that Ike Leggett has always been very supportive and helpful to us in our budget demands, and he's been a friend of this Board of Elections. Jackie.
I would like to say that you brought up a good comment about many groups around that didn't understand the process. Certainly, we would love to have them ask us to send somebody over. We have Dr. Z and others. Dr. Z, I'm giving you more stuff to do. That to go, that's more than this advertising budget meeting. And we'd love to go and explain the process.
That's wonderful. And we'd love to.
Well, please do call. Everybody. That if you have groups that need the process explained, please call, and we'll see that that's part of the outreach we'd love to do.
All right.
Who should they contact directly?
Who should we contact directly?
Dr. Z.
Dr. Z, sitting right down here. Stand up and take a bow, Dr. Z.
How about your full name?
Your full name.
And your number? Your phone number?
Phone number is 240-777-8532. That's my direct. Okay.
Marianne, if you could lay out for us what proposals you want to make. Oh, Naheed? Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Do you want to go ahead?
That's the one you have. 3,500 from.
The first one is from line item 63202, which is central duplication postage.
Yeah.
Includes a number of things related to our postage budget. I'm proposing to take $3,500 from that.
Take
and
from
then
that budget.
Come down to
63810.
63810, which is called charges for facility maintenance. To take $3,500 from that, which is only a $5,000 budget to start with.
Conditioning doesn't break down.
Is that for this building?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. 64012.
And then the final $720 is from 64012 which is non-metropolitan area travel, $720. And I have to say, special thanks again to Marjorie Rohr for, really talking through with me these areas plus something else that I had, and making it work. Not an easy task.
All right, so is there a motion to move these 3 budget items totaling $7,720 to the media advertising budget?
I move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? That's not very controversial. All those in favor? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No one opposed? Okay, so we are now moving $7,720 to the media advertising budget. Now we want to discuss that allocation. Yes, sir.
Mr. President, I would like to further move that we allocate the additional funds in a way that will bring the funding for the individual items to equal what we had in the last election cycle, plus the addition of the new money for the Korean Times.
So we want to make this draft the official advertising budget.
Mary Ann?
For the primary or the general, you're talking about?
This is for the primary.
Put that in the motion, please.
The money doesn't add up if you go back to, you're talking about going back to fiscal year 17, or you're talking about, because fiscal year 17 included advertising for the Express newsletter and Living Local. My proposal did not restore that, because I was under the impression that we didn't have the money to do it, but the $7,720 does not include that, unless you have another way to do that.
Mr. President?
Why doesn't it?
Marjorie.
Because you've added $500.
So
that wasn't there last year.
Okay.
We're short 500 unless we move 500 from somewhere else.
Mary Ann's going to find it.
I just spoke to Mr. Vincent very briefly. My understanding of Mary Ann's motion is to approve the FY17 allocation for FY18 with the addition of $500 for Korea Times. My suggestion for the board is that in order to add that $500, that we reduce Comcast by $500. That would leave it at like 78, 76. I'm just doing that quickly.
Right.
So it would not reduce it by very much. That would give us the 500 for Korea Times and leave everything else the way it was in FY17. Suggestion.
I don't have a problem with that, as long as the $500 does not come out of the Spanish portion of Comcast.
Well, let me ask you this. We have over an $8 million budget. We can't find $500 somewhere? Margie?
How about from one of the places where we just got the $3,500?
Yeah.
Like the postage, for example.
Yeah, let's not, I mean, this is an important issue, and you can...
President?
Yes. I mean, I'd like to see if we can find 500 before we cut Comcast.
I believe that we should be able to take 4,000 from 63202, which would allow you to leave FY17 for FY18 with the addition of the 500 for Korea Times. By changing, and Nahid, you'll need to amend your motion.
Yeah.
But if you take 4,000 from that one line item instead of 3,500.
Yeah.
That's from the mail?
From postage.
Postage,
From
yeah.
postage rental.
Okay.
Post office box rental.
So I amend my motion. We take 4,000 from 63202.
So that brings us up to 7,720.
Yes.
We're taking from the other budget items and moving it to the media advertising budget. Is that correct?
No, we are now adding 500 in addition to that.
No, we were at
7,720.
Because
It's going to be 8,220.
Yes,
right,
exactly.
it's going to be 8,220 because
Correct.
it's the same as fiscal year 17 plus the $500.
Correct.
Yeah.
We're now moving 8220 to the media budget. Okay. Is there a motion on your amendment?
Oh, did you?
No, but don't we have to?
Second.
Oh, I'm looking motion.
Second.
Second.
She did.
Any discussion? All those in favor of moving the 8220 to the media budget, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
Is that also, are you including in that motion the distribution that we're just talking about?
Yes.
It's not just
Yes.
moving the money, it's
Yeah, it's
spending it the way we just said.
Separate motion.
Separate motion.
Yes, I had made that motion, that
Okay.
we would spend it in the same allocations that we had in fiscal 17 with the addition of the Korean Times.
Is there a second?
Can I see the
Or is this already is it already a second?
No. No, I need a second.
I'll second.
Alan, second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No one opposed?
I have a question when you're through with this.
Yeah. And Marion, thank you, and Nahid and Margie, and everybody here. I just thank you for your input.
May I have a question about this? Do we have any information, empirical or real, about the efficiency of this process, of who it gets to, how it gets to them, do they use it, that more people have come and voted because of this media thing? Do we have any real evidence of the efficiency other than one or two people that said they came because they heard?
The only thing we have is from some of the media outlets provide me with a report at the end of the advertising campaign, letting me know how many hits they had, how many people it saw. All of the media outlets have not provided that in the past. However, I had already planned to make that a requirement when I get the contracts in place for this year, so that going forward, we will be able to see how many people are receiving the message from the various outlets and can make decisions based on that in the future.
How do they know? These are radio outlets or TV we're talking about, aren't they? They're they're not computer generated ads.
They know how many people are clicking through to see something when they're seeing something
There's
online.
also Nielsen ratings for the radio
Yeah,
station.
but we don't know how that would affect this. Okay, thank you. So the answer's no.
And everybody, again, thank you for your comments. Very, very helpful.
Are we also going to talk about the plans for fiscal year 19?
I don't know. We don't know how much we're going to get yet.
No, I agree.
Can we? I think we should move that part back
Yes.
to the
Yes.
to the regular.
We don't have any.
Well, you have all these people here who want to hear about outreach. I don't know how long a conversation needs to be.
Oh, yeah,
Well, we're not going to do 19. We don't know what the money
Right,
is.
which means that we can deal with it pretty quickly. I just had a couple of things I was.
we're not.
We still don't know how much we're getting. We have to
Exactly.
absorb that.
May I?
Dave.
Okay. So when Alex and I met, and I was asked for a proposal for fiscal year 19, that was precisely what I said, which was that for fiscal year 19, I would prefer that we try to get as much money from the county government as we can before we try and figure out how to do it. I do think, and this gets to Jackie's question, I do think that we should be considering other means of outreach that we haven't used so much of up till now. The one that's probably the most cost-effective and useful is digital outreach. That will not hit everybody because I know that my mother, for example, does not have a smartphone. But for my kids, they're much more likely to see it than by anything we put on the radio. So my hope would be is that between now and whenever we have to make decisions about fiscal year 19, in addition to the fact that we're obviously going to need to talk to our elected officials, I think there's a fair amount of research, and I have some information that I can provide you, Margie, that one of the outlets gave me about some of our options for digital outreach. They can target things pretty carefully. They can limit it to people who are over a certain age. They can limit it to people who live in Montgomery County. So I mean, I know that when we do radio, we are, by definition, we're going to be broadcasting to some people who aren't eligible to vote in Montgomery County because they don't live in Montgomery County. If we do the digital, we may be able for less money to hit people more efficiently.
That's a good point.
I agree.
So we'll put the discussion off until Mike tells us how much we're getting, right, Mike?
Right.
I'll tell you on March 15th.
Well, we still have the council after that
Yes.
as well, so let's
No, that's a good point.
leave them out
We'll
either.
defer 2019 discussion until we know how much we're getting. Okay? All right, so we're going to move on with our...
Oh,
Mr. President,
hold on.
I think there is an issue I wanted to raise in connection with the outreach committee. If you think it's better that we do it towards the end of the meeting?
I would wait, yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Let's move forward.
Is there some reason why we can't? We have all these people here to talk about outreach. Is there some reason why we can't do it now?
Was that on the merits of what we did, or?
No, it's not.
No.
If there's a problem with the process, I think that our public has a right to know what Mr. Vincent's concerns are as well.
You want to raise it now, Alex, or wait?
I'm going to wait.
Okay.
And then
Okay,
new
so
business.
we're gonna move on. Margaret, let's see, back to you.
Okay. Personnel, ads for election aides went up at the county website and on our Facebook. Interviews and hiring has started. We have, I think we're almost completely filled our IT staff positions, and we're still completing recruiter positions and trainer positions. So that's it with regards to personnel. Budget, Margie?
The FY18 operating budget spreadsheet was distributed to everybody in advance of the meeting. Currently, as of the end of January, we've spent 30.39% of the budget 7 months in. We all know that, starting with the next spreadsheet, you'll start seeing some significant hits on that. But I do feel that we are right on track for what I'm expecting for this year. And I'll be happy to try to answer any questions anybody might have.
And try is the operative word.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Good, okay, thank you, Mark.
Okay, sorry. For voter registration, I'm going to pretty much turn this over to Jessica, but I do want to point out two things. Jessica and Leslie will be on the county-based television program, Mosaic, to discuss voter services and our need for election judges, and a follow-up with regards to action from the board in November. We received 2 complaints about Cedar Lane Unitarian Church moving there. I talked to both of the individuals, and they and Chris talked to the pastor, and this issue has been resolved. Okay, Jessica?
I'm going to interrupt Jessica with apologies. I did forget to mention that we have heard from the County Council and the Government Operations Committee. We'll hear discussion of our budget on April 18. Right now, we're scheduled as number 2, beginning at 9:30. We all know that can change, so I'll keep you all informed. But right now, April 18 at 9:30.
That's a Thursday.
In the 7th floor hearing room.
April 18th.
Okay.
At 9:30?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Jessica.
10:30.
So, Jessica, when's your TV show?
It's my TV.
I'm
It's
serious.
the 5th.
April
You're
5th?
taping.
What do you
Yeah,
think?
that's
March?
the taping, but I don't.
Oh.
March 5th. But
And this is a country.
County.
No, it's county.
You'll let us know.
I thought you said country. I thought maybe she'd be singing.
County, Montgomery County.
Yeah, let us know
So we
when.
can get some more information out about the upcoming elections and deadlines.
Yeah, let us know. I'd like to see that.
So we can do that. We had 644,279 active registrants and 81,113 inactive registered voters. So total 725,392 registrants are on the roll.
In addition to processing additional registrations and an influx of absentee applications, we have been working, me and Janet and IT have been working on updating the street files. So blitz maintenance kind of comes down to your foundation, which is your street files, new addresses. A lot of the municipalities have been busy annexing, changing property names, building out new areas. Rio's grown. So we've added new addresses and kind of changed some existing blocks. So we've been keeping busy, keeping up with that. And then we also have been processing the return mail for the voters that receive the notification of a polling place change. So we've been working diligently to get new addresses and get confirmation out to those folks that look like they don't live there anymore to find out where they are and get them their new polling place. And then the last thing we've been working on is we've had a lot of requests for registrar training. This is a program that's outlined by the state where we train anybody over the age of 18 or will be 18 by the general election who's interested in going out and registering voters. We conduct a class. They're scheduled here on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. And we also will schedule them in the evenings for interested groups. And we've trained over 60 people this month alone. So we've been doing a lot of classes. It's a great opportunity to get our key connectors out in the community, doing kind of that hands-on outreach. And so these are just people coming in, we give them the information, and then they go out and spread the word. So that's what we've been up to.
Jess, let me ask you a question. And more, are we getting any feedback from people who are having their polling place moved?
I think we've had some people who've called just to inquire, why, what happened, and usually the answer is, sorry, it's construction, it's an HVAC thing, and they'll say, oh, can we go back? Yes, as soon as the construction's over, we'll give you the next, and they, great, thank you so much, appreciate you letting us know.
Are we putting that reason on notifications to people that we're moving?
We will be moving. Well, with that notification goes out in May.
And it'll say due to school construction.
Yeah, it identifies.
Big letters?
Exactly.
Big letters?
Well, yeah, I think so.
Big,
It's
bold
big
letters?
Okay.
Yeah, but most of the people have been really good about it. Yeah.
Good, thanks. Okay.
Okay, State Board of Elections security. There was an NBC story, and Jim asked me to ask the state to come here and talk about it. State's position pretty much is that's what the biennial was about. They addressed the issue, and anyway, I believe I sent out the information that Nikki Trella asked me to send out, and then I added it. Basically, they're saying that the information is not new, that the Department of Homeland Security identified their online voter reg system as one of the 21 systems that had actively linked to Russian government. And they were aware of the DHS officially notified Maryland in September but they were aware of the activity but not the source when it happened, and they provided the federal government with information. The online voter registration system was not one that was hacked. There's no evidence that the system was breached. SBE and the vendor that hosts the online voter registration identified scanning or probing activity when it occurs, and the IP address associated with the activity is immediately blocked. And I can attest to that we get information there's one information packet that comes to us every Monday, but if they have something other than that, it comes directly to us. We share it with the county IT, and it is immediately blocked. And then in your packet, there was a statement that was sent out by ES&S to address a recent New York Times article that was just sent to me. It was sent late Friday, and so it's for your review. And then there were different articles with regards to the updates regarding potential hacking. Linda was at the Secretary of State and National Association of State Election Directors, and she did participate in the closed door meeting. That information has not been shared with us. We do have a meeting with the state board, the director and deputy director on March 8th, and hopefully they'll provide us whatever information they can. Again, it's classified, so I don't know how that all works. So that's the status of security. Additionally,
Can I?
Okay.
I find that very disappointing, Margaret. Certainly, I recognize this is not, your fault, but our requesting the state board to send someone here to talk to our board, if it's of such a sensitive nature, it could be done in executive session, which I believe is what they go into to, discuss their issues related to the security. And but simply to say, well, this was addressed at the last, state board,
biennial.
The biennial meeting, is not sufficient, because there's no interaction at those presentations. I mean, they have, people that guest lecturers come in and talk to an issue or whatnot, and the ability to question them, to have a back and forth discussion simply doesn't exist in those venues. And it would be very different if we had the ability, I think, to have, the proper people come here that we can delve into it a little more. Because some of these articles and the people, such as Paul today that spoke to this issue, we're constantly, as board members, it's probably the biggest issue we get asked about. Well, gee, are you guys worried about security? What are you doing? I read this in the paper.
All the time.
Blah, blah, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just don't think that is sufficient response from the state. And I don't know what we can do to, make our wishes known on this. I think simply calling the state staff and complaining isn't going to do it. I think we need probably a very strong letter that goes forward to the state board.
I think we need, excuse me, David, I think we can make our own outreach. There's no reason we can't call Homeland Security or whoever the right appropriate people and ask them to come. We certainly have the stature to be able to draw that kind of person to come and talk to us. If the state wouldn't cooperate, or the cooperation is as it has been. So I think that is something I just throw in the mix, that there's no reason we can't invite people that understand it completely and have hopefully answers.
Jim, may I suggest you may want to reach out to the chair, Mr. McManus, and see whether he would have someone from the state staff come to the next meeting, because, in addition to all this other media stuff that's going on in terms of hacking and issues, this board is a defendant in this judicial watch case, which brings into question the quality assurance that we have for voter registration here in Maryland.
I will call Dave McManus.
It would be worthwhile for them to have someone.
Dave and then Alan.
And along those lines, part of the concern is not just that we don't have the opportunity for interaction at these meetings. We don't have the opportunity for interaction almost at all. And recent example that I had a voter who informed me that she changed her address online, received her voter card, and had changed her party affiliation, which she swears she did not do. And I said, well, did you check the confirmation when you changed it? And she swears the confirmation said Democrat, the voter card said Republican. She then went online. The first time she went online, she did it on her phone. First of all, I asked her, have you been to the Motor Vehicle Administration any time recently? And the answer was no. But first time she did it on her phone. Second time she did it to correct it from Republican to Democrat, she did it on her laptop. I was in touch with Jessica, who helpfully checked what the system said, and the system now says her correct new address and her correct party affiliation. But I asked, I think, what is a pretty obvious question: how did this happen? Because I would assume that if the voter made a mistake, that there would be some kind of electronic trail that would show that, and if the voter didn't make a mistake, there would be some kind of electronic trail that would show that. But either way, that we would get some kind of a response. And as of today, and this was...
Who'd you reach out to?
I reached out to Jessica. Jessica, who did you reach out to?
I spoke to Mary Wagner at the state board, and what I asked was David's question, that we had a voter whose party affiliation didn't match what she felt that she submitted. And kind of how the process works is when you submit it online, it goes into like a little holding place, and then they send it to us, and we have to physically review this electronic record, and then it gets, our staff, after eyeing it, decides if it goes in. Of course, we have no way of knowing if a party affiliation changes because the voter inadvertently made a mistake or, what happened on the back end. And so in this case, it was reviewed, of course, it was inputted into the system. David brought this to our attention and had communicated that she already had made the change by submitting another form, which then came through again. I watched that batch go through, and that information was then updated. And the state's response was the electronic record that we get is the same electronic record that they have. So they don't have any way of, they said whatever is minted when the person hits submit is what exists.
And I guess what I'm suggesting is that when it comes to these security issues, there's a lot of things that we don't have the ability to do. I mean, we're not going to be able on our own to combat the cyber warfare of countries across the world. But what we can do is encourage our voters when they see problems to let us know and to try and follow up on them to see how they occurred. And in this instance, when we try to follow up to see how it occurred, I mean, it seems like there is kind of a default response, which is that it must have been the voter's fault because here it is, on whatever it is. Well, we know from experience with the MVA that that's not always the case, that sometimes things happen that the voter does not control. And the fear would be is that there's someone else, since people can go online and with certain basic information, they can access other people's voter registration information. Then the fear would be is that someone else is out there doing something. It doesn't even have to be a foreign power. It could be anybody. And so my hope would be that we would have a conversation with the state to find out what we can do in order to do this. Obviously, other than just telling the voters, check frequently.
And I will say that the state, in response to, I think, some of the concerns both out of our county and other counties, have created a correspondence that now goes out to voters who have requested an address change. There's a correspondence piece that goes to the previous address just to say, we've moved you from this address. And that's just so that the voter, in case they didn't move, then they can notify us and let us know that that information wasn't correct. This is just starting, brand new process, but the early feedback mostly is, oh, my son moved and changed our household name, and that's why our stuff got automatically updated. But it's helped us kind of unravel some situations that have taken place for various reasons.
Yeah, I will call David McManus. I know him very well, and get somebody here. And in terms of security, I spoke to Margaret. I had some other concerns about security, which we're going to add to the agenda next month, Margaret. We're going to discuss security issues about this building, the physical plant, and also the horrible topic of security at our voting sites, early voting sites, in terms of events that we've all seen.
Physical security?
The active shooter situation, that the worst case scenario situations. We're going to talk about our protocols and the security of this building, which I've always been very concerned about.
Is there? I've two comments. Is there anything in the judge's training about that at all, that kind of thing? And if not, should we do something about it?
There is considerable training as to what to do in an emergency situation, and we did add this year active shooter.
Okay. David, in addition to what you said, I want to add, at the board meeting, there was a young woman that came in, perfectly rational young woman that had moved from Baltimore City, from here to there in Baltimore City, as I gather, and had a litany of problems when she went to vote. And they let her speak, and she went through them. And when she got through, when the meeting was over, I turned to her and said, have you called, and gave her a name or two to call in Baltimore. And she said, you're the first person that's ever even addressed me with all of these. And I happened to know the voting site she was talking about.
In Baltimore?
What?
You say it was a site in Baltimore?
Mm-hmm. In Baltimore City.
Yeah.
And it was a difficult one. there was a total lack of response on the state's part to her. And I thought, here I am in Montgomery County helping this woman in Baltimore City by giving her, and I felt for the system when that happened. So I'm agreeing with what you're saying about the need for the
Lisa,
state
yeah,
to
let me
be
just,
more
Lisa,
responsive.
we're going to add to the agenda next month.
I got it.
You got the security, Al?
Yeah, I agree with Marianne. I agree with Kevin. And like Jackie, I also get questions of people like, what's happening? How can we be sure it's secure? I have a lot of questions to ask the state. Like, if they scanned the voter registration system, how do we know that it wasn't breached? How do we know that this won't happen again? How do we know that this is secure against any kind of hacking in the future? What kind of assurances can we give the public about this? The thumb drives, are the thumb drives cleaned out thoroughly? No viruses in them before they're used? Things like that people have asked me. So there are loads of questions which everybody will have here of the state to get assurances that everything is secure, not only in registration but also in the voting process.
Margaret, is there a name of someone we want, a particular person that we want here, or?
Nikki.
We want Nikki?
I'm sorry. I'm thinking that in addition to Nikki, that perhaps we need to have a professional, somebody from the Fed, for Homeland Security or somebody like that come in.
Well, I can certainly ask.
I'm not sure if Homeland Security is going to be anxious
I don't know
to
if
do
that's
that.
the right one. Whoever the right Fed is, it's in
Yeah.
charge of this, the
Right.
whole election thing.
I'm just thinking
is
that
there a
you know,
state person?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
there must be an equivalent at
Well,
the
there's
state
a Homeland
level.
Security that state equivalent. I think that we let me.
The Homeland Security discussion that occurred recently with the Secretary of State offices and the National Association of Election Administrators, which is Linda. And the Secretary of State in this state does not have anything to do with elections except to receive petitions.
Except to receive the what?
Petitions.
Okay.
The balance of election administration is housed with the State Board of Elections. So
my point is, I think we need someone in addition to that has expertise. That since there's a question about the breaching in Maryland, we need to get somebody, in my opinion, outside of Maryland to come in and talk about it. What are ways to make sure it doesn't happen again? And I think going to the Board of Elections chairman to get Nikki here is fine. I think that we need to go further than that. It's probably not within Nikki's purview to be an expert on all aspects. And it seems to me we ought to get either a private person or a public.
I just want to point out some procedural issues for an outside expert to come in and discuss the State Board of Elections voter registration system and voting system would mean that they would have to learn about those two systems, and the state is not going to turn that information over.
All right. So you're saying, what I'm hearing you say, is that Nikki is the only expert that we should have in here, and she will know it all.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if you want to get an expert, you need to contact Nikki, and you need to ask. Actually, you need to send a letter to Linda Lamone and Dave McManus stating that you want someone from the State Board staff to be made available to answer your technical questions, and that you would like to also hear from someone who is knowledgeable of the voter registration system, that works for Maryland, and also is knowledgeable of the voting system and is related to Maryland.
Jim, do you think a letter is needed, or do you think your phone call to the
Well,
president might do?
Well, I'll
might
call
do it?
Dave and ask him if he needs a letter.
Right, because if he needs a letter, that's fine. But otherwise, they may prefer to do it without a letter. I'm guessing that there will be it'll be difficult to get the federal government to talk about this with us. They're going to want to talk to states. I read an article, I don't remember which publication it was, that indicated that Linda Lamone is getting a top secret clearance in order to be able to have a conversation with the feds about this subject. And I suspect that if we wanted to be read into that, it would require a lot of security clearances before that would happen.
It'd be a big
May I
production.
say something? You said to take some steps. It never happened again. That never will happen again. It will happen again.
Well, I think what you want to take from these talking points, though, Jackie, is that the scanning or probing was identified and the IP addresses were blocked. So we
It was blocked. No, I understand that. I was trying to get together this conversation we're having about the state versus what needs to be done, what we can do, and I'm just surprised and delighted that Nikki will be expert enough to know how that we can protect ourselves. So that's what I'm just saying.
It's not only, I mean, obviously blocking the IP address suggests that, I mean, the bad guys will try from other IP addresses. We want to both make sure that we can do it again. We also want to be able to explain it to our public so that they can.
That's what I want. Somebody
that they
tell
can.
us, so we can tell our public, our people, when they ask what it's all about.
In understandable English,
Exactly.
or Spanish. But you know what I mean.
I assume the State Board of Election staff probably works with the Maryland Information Technology Department. I mean, I would think there's some, back and forth.
It'd be nice
Maybe
if they were,
really,
if they could tell us that and explain that to us. I mean,
maybe that would be the person to come with Nikki.
I'll call Dave McManus and start the ball rolling. Yeah, good suggestions. Yeah.
Okay, going on further. Okay, where are we?
Absentee.
I'm right. Absentee mail vendor. Discussion with the vendor. Once again, the contract is with the state and ES&S. So SBE controls the contract. I was politely told that election directors and deputies will receive a briefing on this matter on March 8th. Before I went and asked permission, I contacted the vendor directly, and by the time we had our conference call, they had heard from the state that meeting was going to occur. So while we did have an opportunity to talk to the vendor that handles all the absentee mail, they did tell us that the mailings are going to go out. They will be going through the United States Post Office first class, probably going to be mailed from the company location in Texas. Our staff took time to describe the number of issues that we've faced over the past several years with the previous vendor. Most of our questions were unanswered because we were directed to go to the State Board staff. And if you have any questions, I have been directed to ask you to write them down, and I will take them to the meeting and see if we can get them to follow up with that.
Yeah.
Okay?
Could the mail be from a Maryland location to facility? No.
No, the contract has been let. All right.
Does this involve the issue of the poll books and the updating there?
No. No, this does not involve poll books.
Okay. Do you know about that issue?
The poll books, we're going through a series of testing right now.
That's right.
And I do know that the tablets that they were going to possibly use, they have jettisoned that as a pilot project.
Yes. Well, at the state board on the agenda was just ever so slightly referring to the fact that they did have this pilot in 2 counties, Charles and Caroline, and that there were a lot of bugs in it.
Tablets.
Yeah.
The new system.
So this is not the poll books.
No.
Because aren't they updating the software in the poll books?
Yes, poll books. We're going through another series of testing this week with regards to the poll books and the software. But what they're describing is the new tablet poll books that the state was looking at doing a pilot deployment this year in those 2 counties. And as I understand it, that has been withdrawn.
And so those that we were talking about, those are not the new tablet pollables.
No, it was something else
that was
apparently.
something else.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So that
That was a
explains that because
concern.
we
That was a real
thought
concern.
it was
Yeah,
the
real concern.
update that we'd all be affected by.
No. Okay, then on my issues, 75 of the DS200 scanners were delivered to the board on Friday. This is so that we have 2 scanners per precinct. The balance of the units are expected to be delivered in the next 7 days.
So we don't normally keep them here between elections?
Well, no, the lease was only for 1
Oh, I see.
election, so they hauled them out.
Okay.
And then there was a follow-up with regards to Runback and the ballot duplication software. They did make a software change, but it still does not fit our needs, and it would cost another $2,000, making the cost $47,000. I felt that the change that they were making and charging us $2,000 was charging us $2,000 to do a beta test. This is not cost effective, especially with the number of absentee ballots that we expect to see in this election cycle. So I declined again to participate in this fairly expensive ballot duplication by software from Runback.
There was reference made at the meeting that there was one county that was still considering using that. Do you know who that is?
Yeah, I'm trying to nail it down, but I think it's Baltimore City.
That's what I was told. I haven't talked to them directly.
Really? Okay.
Mm-hmm. So,
and they would have to pay all that money
Yeah,
and
$39,000 for it.
$47.
Yeah.
So
for us.
How many scanners will there be altogether? How many scanners will there be altogether?
There'll be two per precinct, but there will always be 2 per precinct. We may not be able to have 2. There's a couple of precincts that are just too small, or they don't have the electrical. So Quince Orchard Library comes to the top of the list. That is just too small, and there's no place to put it. And the electrical is very dicey.
We have some in reserve, too, in case something goes down, right?
We have a few in reserve, that is correct. Okay. So, legislation. Allison.
I count about 80 bills that Margaret had asked me not to take the time to go through every single one of them. But there are a few that I want to draw to your attention. Tomorrow, there are 2 different audit bills being heard, one of which Mayo is opposed to, and one of which Mayo is not taking any position on. The one that Mayo is opposed to is Delegate Rosenberg's bill. It would involve, these are the hands, what they call a tabulation audit, so physically eyeing the paper ballot and comparing it to the tabulated result. Delegate Rosenberg's bill would have a lot of context, and then there's some language that we've continued to wrangle over, how you would do such an audit that's of concern to Mayo in that bill. Delegate Kaiser, however, has a bill, it's House Bill 1278, that is being heard. It does allow for what Mayo is saying is a, manageable workload volume, but then it also, that's in large part because it allows for this to be done after the certification of the election, within 120 days. So I note that for you. Mayo's not taking a position on it. Should we get to a point where conducting this prior to certification again becomes of, then Mayo may very well be pushing back because, of course, of the volume of the work that we're doing in between election day and that certification deadline. But right now there is a bill that Mayo is taking no position on, and it is Kaiser's bill.
What would happen if the audit found problems after the certification that affected the result?
The way that the language is phrased, it says that the purpose, it says that it may not be used to affect the certified results, and that the purpose of it would be prospectively to improve systems moving forward in the future.
So why would that be the case?
I apologize. I only spoke to the physical eyeballing of the ballots part. It does have the clear ballot system or a electronic audit of the images, the ballot images, that it would require for the primary and for the general, which we've been piloting the last few elections, but have not had. It's not required. And so it would have that. It's just not the physical, not the physical audit prior to certification.
So we would certify an unaudited result?
Well, it's audited extensively, but this
Right.
particular piece of comparing and we have all these different things we call the audit, but this particular piece of eyeballing the paper ballots and comparing them to the scanned totals,
To see whether the
which is
scans were
not
accurate.
required currently,
Right.
would be required, but not be required prior to the certification.
Now that's a separate bill from Delegate Kaiser's bill, or that's Kaiser's bill?
That is Kaiser's bill.
Okay.
Allison, they don't give us much notice on these things. When you get this legislative stuff, can you disseminate it as quickly as you can to all of us?
The way I get this legislative stuff is that I physically go to the General Assembly's website and I look at what's there. I don't get something that I can readily
But can you
forward.
send it to us when you find something interesting?
Or send us a link where we can find it?
It's the same link, but I can send it periodically. I can send it however.
Or lists of the bills. It's just hard for us to be on top of it if we learn about it while we're sitting here.
Absolutely. I can send you that link as soon as I get back to my desk.
Okay.
And then I'm happy to send whatever information the board desires.
So we get more heads
the
up,
risk
you
of
know.
not spending 2 hours
Like,
sitting here going through.
You know, often we're told about a bill in the hearings like tomorrow at 1.
Right.
You know, so you
Um,
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Jim and Mary Ann testified on Senate Bill 333. I have an amendment that I will also circulate to you, the gist of which is that Senator Simonaire heard the concerns that were voiced from Montgomery County and from some folks from Harford County who also showed up at the hearing. As you all recall, one issue here is counting. It is those situations where you have both an absentee ballot and a provisional ballot from someone. There was a solution proposed, which the state board had advanced, to count the provisional. As he heard, he's gone through the same basically compressed education process that we've all gone through in talking this over in the last year or two. But what he decided in the meantime to do is to just basically pull back. His bill, as he is planning to amend it, would simply clarify the status quo to assure him that the law provides for our current practice, which is simply that in the event that that were to occur where you've got an apparently, a ballot not cast by somebody, that absentee ballot would not be counted, but the provisional would if the absentee wasn't actually cast by the person. So it really is just clarifying the current process you follow. If you get an absentee ballot that's supposedly, their ballot, but it was returned by their son or something, then you would reject that and you would count their actual provisional ballot. And he's just clarifying that status quo, not in fact going further to address the question of those voters, typically the nursing home voters that we have who have both returned an absentee and a provisional ballot. So it's kind of a step forward, a step back.
I thought the status quo with those voters was that we have to reject both.
And his bill as amended would still have you rejecting both in
That's
those
the
situations.
really disappointing thing out of all of this is, we thought, well, at least, there's a solution. They're recognizing the problem, put it that way, that, there are legitimate people out there who have voted 2 ballots for a variety of reasons, but they're not criminals, and yet we're not able to count one of those ballots.
Well, they're taking it from a regulation and making it into a statute, it sounds like, which makes it even worse, harder to change.
That's not the way I read the language, but I will forward you the language so you can take a look at that. I just got it as an email document. I haven't seen it online yet. It's just that if a provisional ballot and an absentee ballot or 2 provisional ballots are cast in the name of the same individual for the same election, The local board shall review all documents relating to the individual to verify the ballots. If the local board determines that only one of the ballots was cast by the voter, the local board shall count the verified ballot and reject the unverified ballot. And what it does is remove the language that was otherwise addressing those individuals who cast 2 ballots. So it just goes back to being silent on that scenario, and instead it clarifies the scenario where the same person did not actually
How
return
would the
both
board
ballots.
be able to verify whether the same person voted both or not?
Signature's the principal thing they're talking about.
Right. Shows opinion of
Cameras.
signature. With the opinion of signature.
Lots of luck.
If we want to ask
Amateur
Senator
opinions.
Simonaire for a further clarification of this, we can. He's open to it.
Well, can we suggest to him the same thing we suggested to the state earlier?
We can. Senator Simonaire has indicated that he is not comfortable counting the absentee in those
Right.
situations, which is where we got down the path.
Yeah,
His issue was fraud.
That's where he really sees the fraud issue
That's his
coming
main-
in, is that there could be people casting that absentee ballot, not the voter.
So if we were to accept the provisional in that circumstance, would he object to that?
That was his proposal, which we pointed out would mean holding on to those absentee ballots even longer than we currently do.
Right.
in order
I mean, that's
to
a real nightmare.
wait and
for the town.
investigate those. So
Right.
We had wanted to change it enough that we could open the absentees early. That was the point that we were
Yes.
making, that we would like to have it so that we could open the absentees 3, 5, 7, whatever days before the election and stop that holdup after the election.
Right, but this is at the expense of the voters. I mean, it's not at the
Might or might
expense.
not be.
Well, for most of the time, it wouldn't be for most of the absentees that are legitimately cast. But in this circumstance, it sounds like I think what it sounds like the price of getting the ability to deal with the absentees early is that if somebody votes both, that it has to be discarded. I think that's what he said. Now,
well, that's
No,
I don't see that
Yeah.
as the price. I see that as status quo. He's simply not resolving that matter for us. He's not.
okay, now, what is his role?
He's the sponsor of a bill. which
Okay,
happens
so
to be the only bill
who's the chair of that committee?
Conway.
Conway.
Senator Conway.
Yeah.
So why aren't we talking to Senator Conway?
Who we spoke to was Senator Zucker, because he is a co-sponsor of the bill.
Okay.
We also, well, of course, we
Who was
testified.
very
Senator
interested in
Kagan was there
helping.
as well.
Yeah.
And we've spoken with her staff as well.
Sorry, to.
Senator Kagan.
Mm-hmm. I mean, those all sound like good ideas, but I mean, the fact that the sponsor doesn't go along, he's just one person.
Right. Agreed. I wonder, that may perhaps segue to the other bill that I wanted to talk about, or that Jackie asked me to talk about. Well, isn't related. Senate Bill 592 is a bill ostensibly to, well, not ostensibly, it is a bill to create a joint committee on election oversight to examine and make recommendations for legislative changes to improve election administration and campaign finance regulation. I bring that up now. Actually, the hearing on that was already held, and Mayo testified against it. But Jackie and I talked about it, and she said to go ahead and raise it in light of our conversations over time about the need to examine our election laws and reconsider some of this in a larger sense. And in the meeting with Senator Simonaire and Senator Zucker, Senator Simonaire actually turned to Senator Zucker, as he was working through the complexities of this issue, and said this may be a topic that we ought to study over the summer.
What was Mayo's rationale for rejecting it?
Yeah.
I wasn't there, and I actually have not read the testimony, but what I was told was that there was no need for it, that we already have committees in the General Assembly, for this purpose, and that.
If I may, it goes to the suggestion I've made here. at least twice, and I think 3 times over the last few years, going to a comment that Kevin made. Forgive me, Kevin, for quoting you without calling you first and asking you, about so many of the statutes, so many of the laws were written in the 60s, if not earlier. And with the new technology, we desperately need to upgrade the laws, COMAR, all of the things to do with election. You know, and that I was given the prestige of Montgomery County, that I asked the governor to convene a task force with a couple of senators, a couple of the House people, a couple of us, whatever, on it, to study, to update, not to study it, but to literally update, because obviously we'd need a bunch of lawyers on it, the laws to comply with computers, with ES&S stuff, with all the things we have now that we're working around. We're doing workarounds or ignoring or whatever. In some cases, just ignoring it because they just don't work anymore. And it seems to me that a long-range look at it, with say a year, we have to have some money because we've got to pay the lawyers. God help us. But I think that we really could be in the forefront of upgrading our system, and of course security comes into that play. Lots of things come into the play when we have 50-year-old laws we're trying to comply with all different equipment from when these laws were made. So I would like to see us either discuss, only briefly, but to ask the governor to convene a task force to upgrade the laws and the all COMAR, all the things having to do with elections. And maybe we need to have some public hearings on it over the year time or whatever it takes to get that done.
You think this is the right time to do it?
Yeah, I really think it might be.
Election season?
Well, the governor can do it now, or he can do it after the election. I wouldn't presume to tell him when to do it, but I've just put in the suggestion if we want to ask a couple of other counties to join us in the effort, fine, if you like it. But otherwise, it just seems logical that when you're having to work around laws because of technology, that we might as well try to upgrade it. And let's try to do that.
I think we'd be more successful with 3 or 4 other big counties with us. You know,
no problem.
I can call the presidents of the 4 or 5 of the biggest
and
ones.
I'm sure Baltimore County, Baltimore City, she's very much into that mode.
Yep. PG,
and
Baltimore City.
Stuart might. What do you think?
Walter County.
What do you think Stuart would do?
Stuart was probably
Stuart's the one who testified.
leading the charge against
Yeah,
study.
Don't call Frederick.
Yeah, don't call Frederick.
Okay, I will make those calls. Let's see if we can get some people behind us.
Let's see if we can't get that going. Maybe somebody put together a draft letter that we could send to these counties and have them look at it.
But you're saying the letter would urge the governor to establish a task force on the modernization of the election law article?
Thank you. You did it very well. Thank you.
And a governor's task force is a different thing than a legislative joint committee.
It is a different thing, but that bill that you showed me today horrified me.
I know a lot of these people. I will call them.
Good.
Let's see if we can get some interest.
Thank you.
I should also say, to David's point earlier, the notion of, well, Senate Bill 333. Yes, so we know we're the sponsor of Senate Bill 333 is at this point, and we have spoken to.
Is that Simonary?
This is Simonary, yes. And I believe I said at the last board meeting that Delegate Lutke had expressed an interest in potentially amending that bill once it gets over to the House, if it goes through the Senate. Of course, that's the only vehicle that I see, that or I guess we can take a look and see what other vehicles there might be.
But there's no freestanding
to actually to move this board's interest in opening absentee ballots, in those situations forward.
Actually, Harford County he liked that. Not Harford. Yeah, Harford. It was the man from Harford. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as soon as we get the information, the better. That helps. Because a lot of these hearings were like yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anything else?
Okay, I just have the one other thing as a follow-up, and you had requested training in Damascus, and we have training for election judges in Damascus from April 16th to the 21st.
Oh, great.
Good, thank you.
What's the location?
What are the dates again?
I believe it's at the Senior Center.
Okay.
Oh, that's good.
April 16th to the 21st.
Good, thank you.
That's training, did you say, Margaret?
Election judge
Yeah,
training.
that's good.
Kevin is the next person on the agenda.
We're still waiting for Judge Hollander to issue an opinion in the judicial watch case, so I think it's going to occur in the next 60 days or so, but she's under no timetable as to when she needs to issue an opinion. So that's been relatively quiet. Margaret got an inquiry from someone who's thinking of circulating a petition on a charter amendment. So I'm just alerting you that there may be a potential petition, two potential petitions that are going to be circulated. And for, just as you recall, charter amendments, they need 10,000 signatures. For a change to the county code, they need 5% of the total number of resident active and inactive voters.
Do we know what the substance was, or no?
No, not at this time.
But they can ask for an advance determination, make sure that the charter amendment is not only sufficient as to form, but it's legally sufficient. In other words, it's not in conflict with other provisions of the county charter. So if they avail themselves of that process, we'll have an idea of what it is.
Good, thank
And you said it's the number of signatures needed is 10% of all?
10,000 per charter amendment.
Oh, okay.
And 5% of the total number of resident active and inactive voters if it's a change to the county code. So if it's
700,000.
It's roughly
5%.
35,000 signatures that were required for
a code change.
A code change.
But a change to the state law
That's a
would
lot.
only require 10,000.
Correct.
Huh.
Not much.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Okay.
Okay, under old business, polling place update. I believe Carol Putzel did notify you she was withdrawing her request, and I believe the letter from Dr. Zuckerman was also forwarded to you. Precinct 0430, what was St. Elizabeth's, the staff is recommending Richard Montgomery High School. Chris and Eric and just about everybody went out into that precinct. Woodmont Country Club declined, Faith United Methodist declined, Green Acres School declined, Charles Smith Jewish Day School declined, all of these locations declined. Ring House on Jefferson Street, Lando House, there's no parking. Montrose Community Center was declined. They have a preschool program and there's no parking and the room is too small. Rollins Congressional Club, the one staff person that did talk to Chris basically stated that the bylaws prohibited political activities. Chris tried to explain to him that we're not a political activity, but that wasn't really the way they saw it. So,
Margaret, when you say no parking at Montrose Community Center, what does that really mean? That it's not
on the street.
It's on the
Oh,
street.
it's on the street? Okay.
Anyway, so staff recommends that the voting take place at Richard Montgomery High School. And I did hear what Marianne had explained or expressed with regards to trying to set up a separate room for the two precincts. And staff would like to recommend that all voting take place in the cafeteria. Summer school will be taking place at the same time voting is. School's not going to be closed. So staff recommends the following, that all voters be directed into the cafeteria room. We set up 5 to 6 electronic poll books, then we would have one of Jessica's voting services persons stationed at the location, maybe 2, and separate so that on one side precinct 0430 votes, and on the other side Richard Montgomery High School precinct 0405, I think is the precinct number. That way, we will prevent anyone from unnecessarily going into the wrong room, standing in the wrong line, and then storming out, not voting because they're upset that they had to stand in the line too long. Both sides vote the same ballot. We believe that this will mitigate any problems. Well, it'll mitigate problems with regards to making sure that each person is voting their ballot style for their precinct. So,
Are they different ballot styles?
no, they're the exact same ballot style. The same legislative district, same county council district, same congressional district, same judicial district. Not
So
that
they're
that
all,
counts.
both are voting for all the same candidates.
Yes, except this time what we would do to prevent anyone from voting outside of their precinct, we would have 2 staff persons from voter services who know how to look at a voter authority card, stand there after they've checked in. They would look at that voter authority card and say, Mr. Smith, you need to go over to this side of the room and get your ballot and vote over there. Mr. Jones, you need to get your ballot and you go over here and you vote in.
So they would all go in the same line for the poll books. Okay, then after they, okay, got it.
Then they would be
Well,
sorted out.
you and I heard the incident. This was part of the issue that grew out of the woman from Baltimore City that spoke to the Board of Elections. It can be a nightmare.
It will be a nightmare, but that we have no place to go.
Is there? I mean, in that whole high school, there's no
There's
other
summer
room.
school going on.
Well, taking up what?
What? The cafeteria is huge.
Well, I understand. Maybe we need 2 small rooms. I just hate the thought. Do we have examples of doing this anywhere else?
Yeah, we've had combined precincts in the county for a long time.
Yes, we've done
We have
it.
in
And you
the
have one,
last
the
election.
BCC was one of them?
BCC is one of them.
Yeah.
Oh, Mary,
I
want to hear Mary Ann's concern. What's the
Well,
concern?
I just, the mishmash of it, getting people into their right thing, because, it's fine, you're not going to get a wrong ballot, so to speak, but it's where it gets tabulated, if they put it on the wrong side of the room, it gets part of another precinct when they really live in this one, and
But in this
just
case,
general
it doesn't matter 'cause
confusion.
it's the same ballot.
Pardon me?
In this case, it doesn't matter because it's the
Yes,
same
it
ballot.
does matter. The
vote
tabulation
potentially
for what precinct they vote
We
in.
have, that is possibility. Janet, would you like to comment on this?
Yes, it won't make a difference really what scanner they go to because both of them will be programmed with both ballots. We're just separating them to keep them separate for us so that they don't get directed. Because we're consolidating it, the state is going to send us as a consolidated precinct. And we have like 20 of those already.
So the count is only one precinct
It's
counted?
one the ballot style, like 430 may have ballot style 80.
Yeah.
The other precinct will have ballot style whatever. So when it goes through the scanner, it's looking at the ballot style. So it says that goes to 430, the other one goes to the other. It's the actual ballot number that it's looking at.
The scanner knows it?
Yes.
The scanner knows it.
We have to program it to read the ballot specifically for those 2 precincts.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like early voting.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have
Yeah.
to have the scanner,
The scanner
be able
knows
to
it.
read all of those different styles.
It's scary.
It's not ideal, but it is easier to make sure the person gets the correct ballot once you've already got them at a poll book checked in, and now you can get them the correct ballot, than if you're trying to send them to 2 different rooms on 2 different sides of the school, and then somebody gets in the wrong line, and then you've got to send them to the other side of the school. It's easier to manage the voter experience in a single room.
But in this case, I want to go back to this case we're talking about. The ballot's the same, so separating the precincts is not really necessary.
They still
Yes,
have
it
to
is.
have
Well, you want the
ballot
precinct
style.
count,
Oh,
actually.
all right.
So what
I'm hearing
happens
what you're
is,
saying.
what will happen, because the individuals that are interested in doing political, what is it? Analysis. Thank you. Political analysis are interested in seeing
people in each
how
precinct.
each
Okay, I get
precinct
that.
result is.
Sure.
Sure they are.
Okay, I get that.
If this were a permanent problem and it wasn't really, I think it's a pretty big, this is not a good long-term solution. But the geographical, makeup, the fact that they're the same ballot style, it's like where you dealt with 1367 and 1368. You could consolidate them into a single precinct, and you did merge them. But, and then we pulled them back apart again because it really wasn't a long-term sustainable solution for those. And it would be the same thing here. It's not a long-term sustainable solution for you to just lump them into the same precinct. You're keeping their separate identity in the long term, even though temporarily they're coming together.
And St. Elizabeth said they would welcome us back, and there's somebody new that also is interested. Who was that?
It was Charles Smith Jewish Day School
That was it.
last month when we talked.
Okay. What's the square footage in the cafeteria?
Approximately 6,000 square feet. It has a huge entrance area that would allow for people to line up if we needed to.
A lot of them don't know which ballot they need, which precinct they're in until we check them in.
David?
Correct.
I'd like to explore what happened with Rollins Congressional Club. I very much appreciate that a lot of effort went into looking at a lot of different places, but it sounds like we spoke with a staff member, and I guess we don't know, I'd like to know kind of what level that staff member was at, who made mention about a prohibition on political activities, which Chris correctly said, that's not necessarily directed at us. It may be directed at candidates and parties and all of that. We're still talking about, I have no doubt that Richard Montgomery is large enough and all of that, but it's still a significant distance away from the precinct.
Well, actually, it's right across the street.
No, it is not right across the street. It is in an adjoining, it is in the precinct that is across the street, but it's at the other end of the precinct that's across the street.
It is across the street from the precinct.
But not from the old polling place.
Not across.
No.
So
What are the boundaries of the precinct? Where is Wooten Parkway a boundary, or is Wooten Parkway in the middle of the precinct?
Correct.
Wooten Parkway. That's
The people who
that's
yeah.
to the south. We're going to go from Montrose north.
Right.
And not too far south of the entrance into Richard Montgomery is the boundary.
Okay.
Okay.
But there are quite a few voters who are located close to where St. Elizabeth's are, who will have, it's depending on which route they take, it's either 2.5 miles drive or 4 miles drive. So before we were to decide that we go outside of the precinct, I'm just wondering what we can do to follow up to determine whether the site that is within the precinct has been, that we've done everything we can. The fact that one staff member says that they have a bylaw problem does not necessarily mean that the person in authority is going to say that. I do think, as we've discussed before, and as Jim has said many times, that there are. Do we have a map of the precinct itself?
Pass the stand.
I do think that there is a lot to be said for being within the precinct.
Mr. President, we were asked by the state board to begin the process of preparing for the ballots. One of the things that we need, and while I do understand there's a legal requirement for March 27th, I believe, to have all of our precincts declared, we would like for the board to follow through with the staff recommendation for Richard Montgomery High School. This will be a temporary change, and we can return back to St. Elizabeth on Montrose. Or if the board would choose in 2020 to go to the other location that volunteered. But we need to move the ballot process along, and we will be in that process right after the 7th of March.
Jim, as Margaret just said, we have legally another month to deal with this. What this map shows, as I suspected, is that the boundary line for the precinct is Wooten Parkway, which means that the vast majority of the people who live in this precinct, because most of the northern part of this precinct is the back of Woodmont Country Club. Nobody lives there. Then there's the area where Clyde's is. nobody lives there
Yeah, it
either.
is a development in the other side. There's a whole bunch of townhouses and high-rise.
There are some
on the other side of
townhouses
Flag.
that are on the other side of Wooten Parkway. They are in the precinct
Different
that's
precinct.
Richard Montgomery.
I see.
But the precinct that we're talking about, the vast majority of, I don't know what the percentage is, the vast majority of them are far closer to the southern end of the precinct, which is Montrose Road. And I mean, basically, the people live down here, and the polling place we're talking about is at the northern end of the precinct that adjoins it, which is over here. I would think that it would be worth the effort to try and find, just to try and spend, and I would have spent, as I told you, Jim, on the phone, if Margaret had answered my email on Wednesday, I would have done anything I could on Thursday and Friday to be ready for a vote today, and I would have called anyone I knew who could have gotten an answer.
What do you suggest?
I suggest that we look into the Rollins Congressional Club, that we see if that is a legitimate possibility, and that we come back next month and vote on it then. If we can't wait till next month, we can also do it either by email or by phone, whatever the law allows for us to decide it before then.
Well, could we vote on Richard Montgomery unless Chris comes?
If you're gonna wait till more, don't do it. Don't even bother doing it. Just if you want to lay it over till next month and delay the ballot process, that's fine.
Well, it's not due
When do we have to have it done?
27th.
The 27th of March.
And our next meeting is
But it needs work ahead of time.
Our
before
next meeting is the
27th.
19th of March.
Who did the Congressional Club? Who do you talk to?
I spoke with a young woman who was in the office, and what she had told me is that she would pass the information along to her supervisor, that she did not have the final say. Now, I have been trying to reach out to this woman since I had conversation. I've been down there a second time because I couldn't get any response by phone or by email. So I went down again and the building was locked. They're not there on a regular basis. It's pretty much a summer activity, so the staffing is not real great in the winter months. They have not been responsive at all. The only comment that I got was that the bylaws said something about no political activity.
Do you have the name of the supervisor?
Yes, I do. And when you get into the email or to the phone messaging, she's on there.
Okay.
And she has not responded to me after numerous calls and emails.
Okay. Well, if the board decides to hold it over, I'll be happy to work with you to try and get an answer out of them. I just feel like we should exhaust the in-precinct options before we go out of precinct, especially to a spot that is that far away. It will have a significant effect on turnout to have that polling place at Richard Montgomery.
But if the bylaw said they cannot have political activity, so it's not, nobody can do anything. That's the
Well, we
bylaw.
don't
This
know if that's an accurate description of the bylaws, and we don't know how they define a political activity. For many,
But you're going to have to argue with them to convince them, right?
Well, not necessarily. We don't know. We haven't talked to the person who makes the decision.
What if you can't reach them?
Well, if we can't reach them, then we come back next month and we do what we would be doing now. Next month is actually only a few weeks away. We're talking March the 19th.
Could we do something by phone? Does there have to be a public meeting?
Well, phone can be a public meeting.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
It can be set up as a telephone call. Does anyone know anyone at the? I mean, they don't seem particularly interested. I mean, several messages, visited the place twice, didn't respond to emails. What's going to happen when these people get campaign signs all over their property, and they're told they have to do electioneering? I mean,
We were wrong.
you can do it by phone, but I mean, it doesn't sound like there's much progress being made on it.
Tell me where it is again. I find I've never heard of Rollins Country Club.
It's not a country club.
That's
what
Rollins goes off.
It's a neighborhood club. It's called Rollins Congressional Club. It is a neighborhood club. It's not a country club.
It's like a swim club or something.
Correct. It's a swim club, and it is down. The address is Martha Terrace. When we talk about the small Montrose Park, that we visited that has the daycare center, the child center. This pool club area is behind the park. So you go on to Rollins off of 355 and go several blocks down into the community.
Thank you. Thank you. I just didn't know.
If we can solve it within a
Swim
week.
club on June 26th.
Hold on. If we can solve this problem by the end of this week, that's fine. Otherwise, we just do whatever. Just 1 week. Let's give them 1 week until Friday. Then we have a full conversation. We make the decision.
We are talking about a swim club on June 26th.
When school's out.
Yeah.
When school's out.
Do we know if there's a room large enough?
There's a banquet hall listed on their website.
And the other thing is you're spending money.
Yeah.
Leasing money.
And they would have to use.
Oh, okay. It's not a public place. We have to pay them.
Couldn't have kids coming in there.
Our goal is that to have a public place, ADA approved, and also plenty parking. So we have to look at those.
Yes.
This place is not.
Yes.
This is not a public place. We have to pay them.
Well, we have to find out.
So I move we accept that use the Research Montgomery because we are wasting our time.
That we accept Montgomery.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I second.
I move, yes. Second.
Any further discussion?
We're wasting our time.
All those in favor of Richard Montgomery as the polling place in question, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
No, actually, I had a question. Will this be for both of the elections?
Yes.
Because it sort of has to be, but
The big
sometimes you can get, because they could, we could go back to St. Elizabeth's in November, I presume.
Yes, but in the past, you have not really been in favor of that.
Who has not?
Polling places.
Changing polling places.
Richard Montgomery's up there.
Yeah, well, yeah, I see what you mean, the people,
Yeah. So we have not done that.
Better keep the same place.
They tried reasonable
the club is over here.
time.
You could make that decision.
Well,
you could
I mean,
declare an emergency
Here's the
after
picture of the room.
primary election and go back, and we could go to the state board.
I'm trying to think what would be best for the voters in a situation like that.
Well, one of the things that we would have to do is find out that St. Elizabeth's is going to make this facility available to us.
Yeah. Well, they've invited us back at the start.
What was the reason that they aren't able to do the primary?
They have a summer camp, yeah.
Well, I think we voted.
Okay, and that was in the cafeteria?
Well, no, Mary Ann didn't vote.
But be sure it's enough.
I
people
voted
are
against.
No, it's 3-2.
I guess I was willing to spend whatever time.
It only holds 200 people.
Pardon me?
20 tables. We're looking at the floor. It just doesn't look big enough.
It doesn't?
Well, 20 tables, we're not going to have 20 tables.
No,
But Margaret,
getting
be
an
sure we
idea
have
of
enough people to direct them where to go.
Yes, we will.
Yes, please.
Yes.
That's very important. Okay.
Okay, going on to the next topic is, the Communications Committee. Did you have a follow-up, Alex?
Did you want to move that?
Yeah, I'd like to move that we discuss this in executive session, please.
What's this?
Old business B.
Well,
New business?
I have to raise a question about that. What's possibly about the Communications Committee that's appropriate for executive session?
Well, because certain statements were made that affected my reputation, and I'd like to discuss them in executive session.
Oh, if you want to go there.
May I have a question?
Do you want to go there?
I think we should discuss it in the
Okay, the president.
Jim, can we finish? Do we finish the business and then go in executive?
Yes.
We don't go and come back.
Yes.
Okay.
So let's go to new business, board calendar.
The board calendar, Lisa and I put that together to allow you to have an idea of what is coming up. We would also like for you to weigh in on if there are certain things that you would like to comment on. If you could please forward your comments to Lisa so that we can put together a calendar for you. We'll be meeting with board attorney to discuss the canvas, and hopefully this process will work a little more smoothly. But as I have said before, and I think Allison has said, it was kind of
The killer.
it was a little rough at the beginning, but when we did our audit, we were dead on the numbers. So. Okay.
No, 2 pages.
Yeah, mine didn't print, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
That's all we would like for you to do is to comment on the calendar.
Something about precinct 1346.
It's
1346.
I mean, there's.
Oh,
What happened to the 4th of
I'm
July?
sorry,
Yeah.
1346.
Well, the 4th of July is really an issue.
1346 is the motion, just to clarify that you are going to use Bauer Community Center.
Oh, yeah.
You had a motion.
That's already been
based-
decided.
Well,
But
the motion was to use the other facility if it was available,
And
I
based
guess,
on the
and I guess you are,
superintendent's comments.
right, you're declaring it to be unavailable.
Well, I'm saying that 1346 at English Manor is not available, and we would like for you to, because we couldn't change Bauer Community Center until you approved English Manor. So we need for you to confirm that Bauer Community Center will be the polling place for 1346 in 2018 election cycle.
Do we need a motion?
Kevin asked me to get a clarification, just so that there's no question.
Do we need a motion, Kevin?
Why don't you do it by motion?
Is there a motion?
I move we accept 1346 about bar.
Second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. The future meetings were laid out by Lisa.
Jim, I'm willing to discuss this in open session. I won't insist on an executive session. So we can go back to talk about this in open session.
Okay, so our last topic is the Communications Committee report. Alex and David. By the way, in terms of what we did today, I want to thank Margie, Marianne, and Naheed for coming up with the budget resolution so that none of the media outlets were cut. They did a great job and a service to the community. Thank you all.
Yeah, and I'd like to echo the thanks to Marianne, especially for all of her efforts in coming up with, what was a really good solution, I think. So there's really nothing much to talk about the committee itself, because I think we've come to, a resolution on the main issue.
Yes.
But there is something very disturbing that has come to my attention, and I feel like I really need to bring this out. It was brought to my attention that was a social media post today by Julian Hafner, who is a Democrat candidate for District 17 delegate. And in this post he wrote, "The Montgomery County Board of Elections is in the process of determining its advertising and outreach budget for this year's election. Predictably, the Republicans, led by member Alex Vincent, propose making cuts that will hinder outreach efforts to Spanish language speakers and voters of color. Democrats believe in ensuring as many voters participate in elections, particularly those who have historically and systematically been discouraged and prevented from doing so. Please help us fight against Republican attempts to disenfranchise Montgomery County voters. If you're able, please attend today's hearing, scheduled at this time and place." Copy of the meeting agenda can be found here. Now, Mr. President, this is an outrageous attack on me. Mr. Hafner is basically accusing me of being a racist. Now, I don't know how Mr. Hafner ever found out that I was involved in this process at all. All I know is we had a communications committee meeting. It was confidential, and confidence was breached. If
That
this
is
is
not
going to
true.
be, just a minute, if this is going to be the order of the day, then it's going to prevent committee members from having a frank discussion of the issues and an exchange of views. And I am not interested in participating in this if this is how I'm going to be dragged through the mud. It's outrageous, and it's got to stop. There was a breach of confidence, and
No,
I don't
there
know how it
wasn't.
happened. Well, Mr. Naaman, are you outing yourself?
I'm saying there wasn't.
Well, there must have been.
Why it wasn't?
Because Alex said at our January meeting, on the record, on tape, that he supported the proposal that was brought at our meeting last time. The proposal that was brought at our meeting last time did decrease the advertising in the areas that they were. Now, I wouldn't have said it the way...
Because of the budget.
No
because we were
decision
asked
had been
to cut
made.
it, yes.
David, we were having an exchange of
Discussion.
views. We had not made any decision. I wanted to have the full board discuss this. But look, if
Alex,
this is how it's going to be...
Alex, your issue is with Julian Hafner, and I would be happy to connect the two of you if
Who provide the information to them? Who provide the sheet which everybody came and they brought that sheet? Who provide them with that?
Which sheet?
The budget committee.
How did they know that there was
subcommittee
any? How did
meeting.
they know that there was any particular money
Right.
being considered at all?
Because at the January meeting, we said, first of all, the proposal was made by the staff, but you didn't say it was a staff position. You said it was your position. You endorsed that position
I
at the
endorsed
January.
that position, that's right, but the staff had proposed it, but that was just my personal view. But he's saying that the Republicans, led by me, want to disenfranchise minority
Right,
voters.
and if he had asked me, I would have said that's not true.
Did you ever talk to him about it?
No, I did not.
Who brought all these people in here today?
I imagine that the social media did. You could ask Dolly. Dolly is here. She represents the Central Committee, not me.
You don't have anything to do with it.
You know
I'm
what?
Just saying that.
You know, I don't. But you know what? I don't owe you any explanation.
No, you don't owe me. But
May I,
Yeah.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Yes.
I just find this discussion.
I mean, you're not Republican and
disgusting.
Democrat.
Would you please just
Yes,
a minute?
right.
This is really disgusting, and it's on many parts. It's disgusting. I have talked ad nauseum about how, when I came to this board, in my service as on the majority side and on the minority side, I leave my politics out in that parking lot before I come in here. And what I have been hearing today, and I have to say I've been hearing it for a couple of years now, off and on, is a disgusting display of politics, partiality politics, and which I never saw in the 4 years that I had the privilege to chair this. And I'm not saying that's anything that you're doing, Mr. President. It's just I find it very upsetting, to say the least. And I hate to see something like this social media piece charging people on a partisan political basis for doing something. It was a presentation that came from the staff. I am presuming that Alex, as chair of that committee, brought it forward. And
Alex brought it forward before we had another
to,
member on the committee.
Yes, that's right.
Right.
Because the staff had presented something to it, and then you were appointed to the committee, and then the committee met, and we had differing, numbers there. And I was happy to say, well, let's just see if we can't find the money, and that would be the easiest thing here. But this is upsetting. Alex has a right to be upset
I agree.
by that.
I agree.
It's a terrible thing.
He just doesn't have a right to be upset with me because I didn't do it.
I didn't say that you did.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't.
No,
You said that the confidence was breached of our meeting. Our meeting consisted of you, me, and Margie.
That's right.
And you were looking at me when you said it.
I was looking around. I wasn't looking at you.
Okay.
I didn't say who did it. I don't know who did it.
Okay. Well, I'm telling you that there's enough information from the January meeting where that proposal was made that cut the budget for that you endorsed.
It was not to cut the budget. We had fewer budget dollars in the budget to begin with.
Okay. It makes cuts to the outreach to the foreign language outlets. You and I had this conversation in great detail when we met, and it was a very cordial conversation. And I would never say that this is the Republicans doing it to the minorities, et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't say that. I mean, do you want me to ask Mr. Hafner to issue a correction? I mean, I don't think that's really my job either, but I'm willing to do it.
If you weren't involved, then I'm not going to ask you to do
I
that.
wasn't involved.
He's going to have to answer for
Let
it.
me ask a question here. I agree with everything Marion just said. Is there something that we can do, and I don't even know who to ask this question, can we condemn this kind of thing? Is there something we can, a resolution we can pass, something to say this is untrue. We have full faith in everybody that's on this board. However we can address this, should we do something like that? Because I agree completely with Alex. It's a terrible, scurrilous piece of well, we perhaps can't mention every piece of social media that comes out, but certainly because the name was mentioned, I think we need to do something about it. What is it? Does anybody have any suggestions what that is?
You want to do like a press release? I don't know. You know, it's out.
May I make a suggestion? A press release that announces what we did today
Well, that's what I'm saying.
is really more effective than trying to respond to individuals on social media, because I'm sure there are other outrageous things said on social media. I'm sure I could point to a few as well, and we can. I mean, we could keep doing that, and we're not really in the position to get into a back and forth on social media, because it requires back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and I'm pretty sure that the board does not want to do that or put the staff in that position.
I didn't suggest that we address this, that we address a situation that we
well, Mr. Hefner deserves to be condemned for comments like this. I mean, this is outrageous. I mean, it was a discussion. I endorsed it at the prior meeting, but we had a confidential discussion about this. We had an exchange of views, and nobody had made any decisions at all about it. And to second guess us and to always be comparing us to people who want to disenfranchise voters because we're considering different proposals, that's just unacceptable. I don't want to serve in this capacity anymore. I don't want to be on this committee, and let the full board deal with it. You know, it's wasting my time. Now, I've got people calling me, emailing me. I've got business negotiations going on. I mean, this is not helpful.
What can we do to help it?
I move we have a press release, as Kevin suggested.
Yeah, well, a press release initially talking about what we did today. You know, that we maintained the media expenditures and added minority media.
Let me tell you that.
How to address Alex, that's the question.
The last 12 years I was here, the last 8 years was Democrat in majority, we were minority. We worked closely together. We worked together.
I remember.
And since Republican become majority, suddenly everybody guard themselves. Oh, the Russians are coming, which is not true. Jim worked so many times, got Marianne as the secretary involved to solve some problem. We all work together. If the budget cut, we work together how to maneuver the money. Me and Marianne so many times with Margie, we try to find money for that. This one, it's not the first time the Democrats attack us. They did it before. We are against black. We are against Spanish. Who said that? We the one we put our sources together to include African American, which they listen to the radio, which everybody listens, something like that. We are not against black. We are not against Spanish. We are not against humanity in the world. This is wrong. The Democrats owe us an apology. And they come here, they send him that hateful things. This is really hurting. That's not how we're supposed to be. We are not Democrat, Republican. We are here to help the resident of this county to have a smooth election, smooth voting, a smooth thing. We are not against. When I go to the polling place, I'm not standing there. Only Republican comes. The Democrats go to hell. That's not the way we operate.
Not the way I operate.
That's not the way it should be. And I don't like people think we are against anything.
I'm thinking out loud, Alex. How about a press release that our board today reinstated the budget, blah blah, serving all the minority communities, and then a quote from you. Communications Committee Chairman Alex Vincent said, quote, "We are very happy to in other words, a positive quote, asserting that what we did."
Well, I'm happy to talk about that. I
don't want him to apologize. He didn't do anything.
No. I'm saying have a press release, what we did, and then a quote from Alex as the Communications Committee Chairman, that today we we sought to,
Have a bipartisan addressing.
yeah, in other words, we're happy to, we were very happy
Maybe
to
you
be
and Alex
able,
could work on.
we're very happy to allocate funds so that all our minority communities, all our communities will be properly notified about election information. In other words, a quote from Alex about the success we had.
Well, I think also part of the
Is that
also
something
this
else?
is, the county council's the one who's dictated what the budget was for all of us.
But doesn't that take the wind out of? But doesn't that take the wind out of the sails?
No.
A quote from Alex that.
No, I'm just saying that the board reallocated money. That this was what was approved, and the board decided to reallocate money to go ahead and meet whatever the funding level was for the last election cycle. But I don't want to say there's a budget. I was listening to people's comments. Like this board acted to go ahead and cut the budget for advertising. I mean, that's furthest from the truth. You all always ask for a lot of money for advertising, and you get what, it's ultimately what gets approved.
I'm just thinking about a quote from Alex that, showing how
For most people don't understand.
all the minorities, communities were served by us today, and we're very
Would you
happy.
be willing to work with Jim to work
I mean,
that
I'd
out?
be willing to work with him. I just feel like these kind of tactics should be condemned. I mean, Julian Hafner was not doing this on his own. Something was going on. Somebody was driving this. I don't know who it was, but people don't come out and just get up one day and decide to do this. And I just.
But a positive quote about you and serving the minority, doesn't that deflate anybody's criticism of you? That you're speaking on behalf, how happy we were to do this.
I just don't want there to be any tacit admission that whatever proposal I had endorsed at the prior meeting was somehow disenfranchising voters.
No, I'm just saying.
Because that's the charge that has been laid down.
Yeah, but a quote from you, how we were so happy to serve all our minority communities.
Maybe you could work out that with his concern that, and I don't know the words. That's why I suggested you all work together on getting the words that Alex needs in there, because you can see what he means.
Well, no, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Well, I guess any kind of press release, the board's going to have to agree to it, right?
Yeah, but I mean, a quote from you speaking on behalf about, as the communications chairman, how we were so happy to fully fund our media requests so that all our minority communities are served.
To work toward our ability to refund.
It wasn't just fully funding. We increased the budget from last year instead of decreasing.
Alex Vincent, our
So
chairman, our communications chairman,
You're obliquely addressing what he says.
we're so happy to announce that not only did we restore funding cuts that were made by the county, that we added monies to further minority outreach.
Have to answer
But
back
doesn't that
to
answer
this
it?
one. We have to answer back to this
Well,
one.
I kind of think we
Jump
Margie,
to the
what do you
conclusion.
think?
Yes,
I don't
right,
know how
right.
we do it, but
We have to answer that
But
one.
does that
That's
continue
hateful.
does that bring it?
And I'd like that to go up on our website
Could we
too,
ask
when
our
they get that
communications
word out.
person what she thinks?
It goes up on all of our
It
media.
does.
Margie?
Yes.
Margie, what do you think?
well, that's a tough question to ask Margie on the spot.
No, I'm just. Yeah.
Can I just say one thing before Margie, I'll let her. But the last year's budget, or the FY18 budget, while yes, you did ask for $50,000, I think, for advertising, but you also asked for an increase in the election judge stipend, which ended up costing the county at least $200,000. And that was a great success. You have been asking for at least 8 years to increase the election judge stipend. So there had to be a trade-off somewhere. The trade-off was there was less money for advertising. And today you resolved that issue by moving money around. And now
I want to address Alex.
No, let's see what Margie says, and then I think the two of you need to work it out.
I'm not opposed to a media advisory going out. I think that we need to be very careful. As an example, we cannot say that we are reaching out to all minority communities
Or whatever,
because we are not.
Right.
I also personally feel like, and I'm probably going to get nudged here, the staff recommendation for FY18 at the budgeted level, reduced everything. There was no consideration of whether it was English or Spanish or anything else. And so I feel a slight attack secondarily to Alex, because what has been written is not the reality. Everything was cut to keep everything there. And so we did not single out one particular ethnicity or anything else. We took it across the board, and that is why Alex supported it initially, because he understood that we had to do that. I have no problem working with Alex and Allison probably to develop a media advisory that states what we did today. Part of me says we're setting a precedent that maybe we shouldn't. But Alex has been attacked, and I think we need to address it. I also want to say that Allison and I had a discussion earlier this afternoon, and it is our opinion that while that showed up on our notification page on Facebook, it is not something that anyone affiliated with our Facebook page is going to see because of the settings that we have on our Facebook page. So you can tag us, but it's not going to be shown unless I decide it's going to be shown, or Allison or Margaret decide. And so no one can see that except people that are affiliated with that gentleman. Okay? So I think because of that, we need to exercise some caution in what we put up on Facebook, because our people have not seen that. Now, all media advisories do go up on Facebook, brief little synopsis, and then the link to the actual media advisory.
But a quote from Alex doesn't...
And we can certainly incorporate something like that in this if that's what the board wants.
Yeah, because a quote from Alex just talking about
The
how...
best solution perhaps.
Yeah, and it doesn't refer to that, but it elevates Alex that we did it.
Idea.
And, you know, mention him as the communications committee chairman. And a quote from Alex.
Worked very hard.
It's a great day in town, you know.
May I suggest that whoever writes Margie and you and Alex work together to word that? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, we can do that.
Is that?
Yeah, that's we're not raising.
We don't have to address this
exactly
except obliquely.
But Alex is speaking for us in a quote that shows what we did.
Yeah.
Since Mr.
To get to the other issue that Alex raises about this and what can be done, I'm also thinking that maybe Jim and I, as a bipartisan spirit framework, perhaps need to reach out to the person that sent this, saying that this was very disturbing to see about the reference to one of our colleagues, and reinforcing that this is not the way the Board of Elections operates. We feel very strongly about our bipartisan role, and certainly any issue under discussion, whether it be budget or anything else, is just that. It's under discussion until the board votes. And to, attack an individual member or a group of members, is not something that...
Jim, would you be willing to do
that?
Yeah,
I'm happy to.
I mean, it gets to the point of
I still like the
reaching out.
press release.
It's sort of interesting
We're
to
talking
me.
about both things.
This person is a candidate for office, and I don't know whether he's still on the Central Committee or not, but
Yes, yes.
with all of the turnout that we had today from MCDCC, he just didn't have the courage to face you in person.
Well, that's right. I have faced him before in court, some years
Oh,
ago.
you have?
Yes.
Oh.
I don't know that this had anything to do with that.
It
but-
becomes clearer. All right, so is it correct? Is this all right? Do you feel as though we're addressing it perhaps as closely as we feel comfortable
I'm
with?
fine with
If a press release and a phone call to him saying whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm okay with that.
Would you like us to do anything in
Yeah, the
addition?
emphasis that
Is
we are not
other than
Republican, we are
higher?
both, they work together, you know? Never been like that.
Well, it's something I take seriously. I think you all know that.
Well, it just makes me more reluctant to put myself out there.
No, I understand. We all
understand.
understand.
If that's what's going to happen, I don't want to do it.
No, we all understand.
So.
Alex, can you send me a quote and then I'll build the press release around it and send it to you to look at?
Yeah.
Yeah, send it to me too. I just,
Yeah.
a
That's
quote.
generous of you to make
Yeah.
a telephone call too. I think that's a very nice.
Yeah, and the quote, nothing to do with that, but just how you're speaking, what we did, and what a positive thing. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, I think that's it.
Move your agenda.
Wait, future meetings, we have that list. Yeah, next meeting is March 19th
Yes.
at 2:30. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move.
Second?
Second.
All agreed? Say aye.
Aye.
No one opposed. We are
Thank you.
adjourned.